welcome to the first episode. Our special guest today is Micky Ogburn. She is the chairwoman of the Henrico County School Board and my own personal representative. Micky, before we really get started talking about anything else, why don't you say hello to the viewers out there?
Hi, everybody. Make one little correction. I'm no longer chairwoman.
No.
As of the middle of January, I became a regular school board member instead of chair of the school board. So just one little correction. But other than that, we're good to go.
Okay, the podcast starts out, the very first episode with a correction had to be made in the very first sentence.
Well, you got to get the legal part right?
What do I know about the law? Come on. What, am I, a lawyer or something? Now, before you even entered politics, though, you spent a career as a teacher, though.
I did. One of my favorite things, something I actually, miss a little bit now that I'm not doing it anymore. But yeah, I was a teacher for more than 20 years, and I did a little bit of everything. I wasn't like some teachers go in and they only teach, middle school or high school or whatever. But I started out, I did my student teaching in middle school thinking that's what I wanted to do, kind of like my dad did. He was a middle school math teacher. And quickly realized that the younger kids were more what I had interest in. So I did my student teaching in kindergarten, second grade, and seventh grade.
Seventh grade?
Seventh. No, many people do all three.
Well, that's a big difference going from seventh grade to kindergarten.
It is. It was eye-opening. And I just realized I really liked the younger kids. So my first job when I was 20 years old, which was a few years ago. We don't need to talk about how many. But when I was 20 years old, I taught in Culpeper, taught second grade. And so then I've taught fifth and sixth since then. So sixth I have done kind of an interesting thing for me. I did sixth grade in an elementary school out in West Virginia and sixth grade in a middle school, which was here in Virginia. So I got to see how that works, and it's very different, surprisingly enough.
More importantly, you probably saw what didn't work as well, though.
That's exactly right. You always do when you switch counties, and you see how things work from one place to another. But yeah, and then I went completely the opposite and taught preschool. So I went from teaching 11 and 12-year-olds to teaching 4-year-olds.
Okay.
Big jump. And did a lot of preschool, which I loved. I was surprised, but taught preschool for a number of years. And then the preschool job, kind of just an opportunity, as oftentimes happens. An opportunity opened up at Short Pump Elementary School, where my kids had gone. And I became a reading teacher at Short Pump Elementary School. So I've kind of, I've run the gamut of different things that I had opportunities to do.
Sounds like the one thing you didn't do is high school.
I did not.
Do you feel like you missed out?
I don't. Because of my degree from Longwood, I was actually certified to teach K through 12. So I could have taught elementary school, which I did, but I was also certified to teach high school history or social studies, and I just never did. The opportunities were there, but I really realized that the younger kids, especially the K1, 2, that age was more my interest and more my passion. And then when I started teaching 4-year-olds, I loved it. It was like I had really found my niche. So I loved teaching preschool.
What would you say it is about preschool that's different, that sets it apart, that is why you love it so much compared to the others, which it still sounds like you enjoyed?
Oh, I did. It's interesting. It's kind of like with me, what you're doing at the time is what you love, because I just love teaching. But the 4-year-olds, they're like little sponges. You're setting them up for the rest of their school career. And I found that to just be inspiring. I thought of everything that I could think of to get kids ready. And so year after year that I taught preschool, I just was like, really affecting the life of this child. I'm getting them ready to read. I'm getting them to understand what numbers mean. I'm getting them to get along with others, which is important in preschool. And setting them up, I knew, like, for example, that their kindergarten teacher would really thank me that they understood how to get along in a classroom setting, which, when the kids are at home, they're living with their siblings. They're listening to mom and dad. But when they go to school, all of a sudden there's this new adult that they have to listen to and respect and pay attention to. And that is something you have to actually teach a child.
Now, just going on a slight tangent,
Sure.
but somewhat on topic. Speaking of reading, read any good books lately? Any favorites?
I have. I've
I've
actually
been posting on Facebook the children's books you love.
I have been. I read a lot of children's books, and I try to find ones that I think kids will enjoy. So when I go into a classroom and I read to children, I have something that's new and current. And I also have a few classics that I enjoy. But I've been trying to make my way through the David Baldacci books.
Oh, like Wish You Well? Is that one of them?
Those. And he has various series of books that he'll pick a character, he'll write 3 or 4 books with that character and then move on to a new series. So I'm going through the John Puller series. He's an investigator, and he worked coincidentally enough for the Army.
Oh,
So I'm reading that series, and I don't know. I guess because I'm married to a lawyer, I like the legal thrillers. I've read all of John.
I never knew your husband was a lawyer all these years.
Shock.
My condolences. You're married to a lawyer.
No, actually, it teaches me a lot. It comes in handy quite often. But I've read, all the John Grisham books. I'm now working my way through all the David Baldacci books. And I'm also a fan of Adriana Trigiani, and I've read her, Big Stone Gap and, books in Virginia, which I find interesting. But when I have time to read, that's the real.
Obviously, you have a lot going on, though.
I do.
Now, you are about to be a grandmother?
Yes. We only have about 6 weeks to go. The baby's due at the end of March, and so that's a new phase of life for me and my family, and we're really excited. And obviously babies determine how long we have to wait, but yeah, about 6 weeks.
That's so exciting. And I knew your son Dave back in high school.
Sure.
So it's just weird to say, wait a minute, that's the crazy guy.
Yeah, that crazy guy.
They're having kids now. Now, that's not fair to your son, though, because he was always level-headed.
He is pretty level-headed, but I tell you, he's like a deer in the headlights right now. He knows from seeing his friends that a big change is coming. So I actually talked to him this morning, and he said that he was trying to bank sleep because he's been reading books on general health and wellness and how to keep yourself healthy. And he's actually been studying, surprisingly enough, sleep and the importance of sleep right before he becomes a father. And so we talked about it this morning, how little sleep he will be getting.
Well, given what he does for a living, for those unfamiliar, he's a Formula One race car driver.
Well, close.
I hope he gets enough sleep.
He actually is an amateur race car driver on the side. He works for Goodyear as a high-performance test driver. So he goes all over the world, and this morning he was in Oklahoma testing cars. And so basically, if you think of the tires that Goodyear makes, he tests those tires on the car that it's made for. And so in the development process, he will get tires from the tire engineers in Akron. They send them to where he lives in San Angelo, Texas, and they will put the beginning tire on a car. He rates it. He'll run all these tests to try and imitate what stupid human drivers do and work this tire to possible failure. And if it does fail, need to tweak it.
Well, as someone who makes part of his living on criminal traffic defense, I hope he's not too good at his job.
Well, Goodyear hopes he's really good at his job because, it's somebody's life at stake and you don't want to be sued. So,
okay, good enough then.
So for Goodyear, yeah.
The way I look at it, with pot becoming legal and cars starting to drive themselves, I'm out of business anyway.
From that perspective, you might be. That's right.
It's good for humanity.
That's it. But, he has taken that love of driving and racing, which he started early on, like from a little kid, and has turned it into his career, but on the side does amateur race car driving. And he drives with the Sports Car Club of America and goes wherever there's a racetrack.
So
and my husband started all of this, so I have him to blame.
This is so cool when people have jobs that kids growing up, they look at and say, whether they look at firefighters, people who go into education, medicine, science. Right. And it's just real cool. Use an example, a friend of mine was an environmentalist activist his entire life. At college, he was with a radical left-wing hippie type crowd, the very stereotype. Right. He had long hair, pierced eyebrow. Now he's a respectable attorney working for the EPA.
Wow.
It's very cool when people have their childhood dreams realized.
Absolutely.
Just do something like that. Well, and as a teacher, it probably brings you back to what you did in many ways, getting people prepared.
Exactly. Well, and the thing is both of my kids have done that. My older one's with the driving, and my younger one, Matthew, when he was in 7th grade, had the opportunity to be a page at the General Assembly. Today, he's a legislative aide to a General Assembly member. And he remembered when he was, 13 years old and got to go stay at the Omni and work with, the lieutenant governor and legislators and learn what it was like to be part of that legal process. Got really interested in politics.
So you're saying there is a process.
There is a process.
There is a process.
Sometimes it doesn't look like it, but yes, there is. And he actually had to do a presentation for his class when he got back from being a page on how a bill becomes a law, because he got to see it from the beginning construction all the way to when he had to collate it and it became an actual law. And he had to take those papers that, it was amazing to watch.
So he was making the sausage,
he
so
was,
to speak.
Exactly right. And so since he saw it early on, it turned on in him to be a love of politics. Shocked us. And so, but my husband is a lobbyist and a lawyer, and loves cars. So both of my kids have taken things from my husband and turned them into their careers, which they're very happy. So that's all you want as a parent. Their passions have become something that they're not living at home in the attic. It's good. Yeah. They can support themselves doing.
Now, as someone who's your entire life's been education, time at the school board, let's actually talk about that.
Sure.
I believe, if I remember correctly, there was an open seat. There's an opening.
Yes.
You were not the establishment candidate.
Nope.
You were running against a gentleman who's highly educated from a good family, who had the immigrant success story.
Right.
Yet you have your own success story as well. And what made you decide to take on someone who had the backing of what they like to call the establishment?
The established
how did that
candidate.
go?
Well, first of all, it takes a leap of faith. Honestly, it was 2014. I sat down with my husband and my son, the one who's in politics, and I said, should I do this? And they both encouraged me tremendously, like, this is something you're interested in.
They didn't try to talk you out of it.
Absolutely not.
Are you sure they like you?
The surprising part is people would ask my husband, are you sure you want her to do this? Are you really sure? And, they were both, all of them, supportive from the beginning. And so I think my husband being in the job that he's in as a lobbyist and a lawyer, and he's works in the General Assembly setting, he understands how important it is for people to step up and be that community servant. And, the General Assembly, it's made up of people who are just that. They are their normal work day lives after the General Assembly is over. They're doctors, lawyers, they're teachers. There's a little bit of everybody from every walk of life. And so he's seen that. And so he thought, that's important to give back to your community. It's a big thing. And I had become really interested in school board. I'd been going to meetings and seeing what goes on and how things go from the classroom to the board level. But I was still teaching. And so I had to take that leap of faith a little bit, leave my job, because you can't teach in Henrico and be on the board too. So I had to leave my job at Short Pump Elementary as a reading teacher and just go full campaign mode. But my younger son, being the politician, was my campaign manager. And so we kept it all in the family. And my son came up with a really, really good campaign plan. And there were times when he'd have to say, now, Mom, we're going back to the plan. Don't go rogue on me. And, I'd get scared, nervous, whatever, that something wasn't going to work.
Oh, it's fine.
Okay. Something wasn't going to work. And he'd say, no, we're good. And he'd rein me back in. But, taking on someone.
You can ignore that little beeping sound we're
Okay.
hearing. I'm not sure if the listeners will be able to hear that sound.
Oh, no.
Just some of my law firm stuff on the background.
Okay. We're dual purpose equipment here. But anyway, taking on someone who was endorsed by everyone, So I looked to not politicians to endorse me. And I went to parents I had worked with, people that knew me from the volunteer things that I had done in the community, and just said, what do you think? Do you think that you have confidence in me to do this job? So on my website, instead of going for politicians, because school board members, in my opinion, politics doesn't enter in all that much.
Thank
and it
God.
really shouldn't.
Amen to that.
It shouldn't. You should do what's best for the school system.
Something that's driving me crazy is things that should not be political have become
Right.
so politicized. Education
Is right up there. Right.
Just security issues in the community, the opioid crisis.
Exactly.
So many others. And, even worse when you see crossover between the opioid crisis and high schools.
Right.
But again, we'll get to that later.
Well, but I agree with you. So I looked at, people that knew me. And the things that I had done in schools and with my kids' sports and all the different things I'd done in our neighborhood, for example. So on my website, I put things like people who had worked with me who knew that I had a passion for doing this, and that they knew me as a teacher or whatever. And so I got a lot of encouragement. Go for it, do it. And so the more I talked to people about it, I thought, yeah, I'm gonna go. And so again, with my husband and my son, and the one that lives here and the one in Texas was, making phone calls on my behalf, and we made it a real family thing. On election day, my sister was at the poll saying, "Please vote for my sister." And we had cousins and my sister-in-law and my brother-in-law, and we had a lot of people who really they stood at the polls and they said, "Please vote for my cousin," whatever it was.
Oh,
and
yes.
my husband was at Short Pump Middle and at I think it was Gayton Baptist Church at the polls.
Well, having family there on
Right.
that day, please vote for my
Please
son,
vote
my
for my
son-in-law.
right.
That means,
And so when
means a
my
lot.
husband said, "Please vote for my wife," there were a couple of people who said, "You really want us to?" and he did. But I think that made a difference. It was organic, so to speak. People understood I really wanted to do this, not as a stepping stone for something else. I want to do it because I have a passion for kids and making things better, and passion for being in schools. And so I won.
I understand that passion, especially with education.
Mm-hmm.
Again, want this to definitely be focused on you, not me. But
Right.
I teach in college,
Right.
and I've seen too many college students in my class who can't even write a research
I know
paper.
it.
It's
Yeah.
frustrating.
It is, yeah.
And when I get calls from my parents why I flunked their 22-year-old in college,
Right.
it's ridiculous.
Right. Well, and that's one of the things I talked to a teacher just last week, and she said that one of the things she was really astounded by, she teaches 6th grade, and she had given an assignment, and she had to teach the kids where to put their name on the paper, how to do it, how to put a heading, very basic
And
things.
you're saying they're having to teach this to people in 6th
Sometimes.
grade.
Mm-hmm.
That's horrifying.
It is horrifying. And so I just was like, so I talked to her. And that's one of the things I really try to do is listen. When I go someplace, like I'm talking like crazy now, but when I go someplace and I get a chance to talk to teachers or to administrators or whatever, I do a lot of listening. And so for this particular teacher, I asked her, I said, what do you think we're not doing for those kids before they get to you? And that's what I try to look at. And this was a sixth grade teacher. And so I very quickly talked to the superintendent, and I said, at this particular school, this is this teacher's experience. So let's look at the elementary school level of kids who are feeding into that school, and we have some gaps in their learning. And so when you find these things, as a school board member, you pass it on, and you say, this is the thing, the little nugget of information I found out. So now what do we do about it? And I'm not one just to either forget about it or not do anything about it. I try to make sure that somebody, somewhere, is paying some attention to that thing that we need to work on.
Going to, our conversation, or part of our conversation about writing papers. I know that for many people, most people don't write papers as part of their everyday adult life.
Right.
I'm in one of the few professions where that's part of it. What's great about students writing papers is it teaches you how to think,
Absolutely.
how to analyze, how to be critical, how to do research.
Absolutely.
And I just think there's a lot to be gained from that, especially in the developmental years.
Absolutely. Well, when my older son, when Dave, was in fourth grade, for example, his teacher in third grade had some family issues, and it prevented her from finishing out the school year. We all understood, of course, family comes first. And so she had to leave. But when Dave got into fourth grade, his fourth grade teacher called me, and she said, I don't really understand. If you could answer a question for me, it would help. Dave doesn't have anything in his writing folder. There's nothing there, which meant, there was a whole year in gap in actually writing essays, writing something. And I said, well, that's because they didn't do any writing in third grade. And so she had a lot to make up for. And a lot of teachers realize the value in actually getting kids to put their thoughts down on paper in an organized fashion. And he didn't have that, so we had some making up to do.
Now, speaking of putting thoughts down on paper, that might seem to many an antiquated notion as technology creeped into the classroom, or not just creeped. I remember I started Gowan High School, ninth grade. That was the first year of the iPad program.
Oh, yeah. I remember that well.
Now things have gone. It's been very expensive. So what are your thoughts of how technology is being used in the classroom, students having their own personal computers issued by the school, the costs?
Right. Well, the cost is worth it. Just recently, the board, I was one of those votes who approved to add even more. And so now we have Chromebooks in 2nd through 5th grade. I was in a classroom last week at at Cackley Elementary School, and there were these little 2nd graders using Chromebooks to do either iMovies or to create a PowerPoint presentation that they were going to be sharing with their parents.
So 2nd graders are using Chromebooks?
Yes.
I'm sorry, but I remember my 3rd or 4th grade teacher brought in an actual laptop into the classroom. This was about 95. Someone wanted to go up to it and just touch it because it was a laptop in a classroom.
Absolutely.
Now, 2nd graders are using it.
Every day. They can every day because they have a class set in every classroom. And it used to be we would have these pods of computers that in the elementary school that would move from classroom to classroom. Problem with those are a lot of times if there's testing that needs to be done or something like that, they grab those computers and the kids don't have access. So more and more the teachers would tell us this is another tool in our arsenal that we would like to have available. And so, for example, when I was at Cackley and these kids were doing this, they're doing a self-reported, basically way to put it, a self-evaluation of themselves, and they were having conferences with their parents about themselves. So first of all, they had to do some honest examination of their work ethic, their behavior in class, things like that. Go around the classroom, take pictures, videos, whatever, of the things that they had been doing, and then they sat down with their parents and showed it to them. And so not only are they having to write what they were going to say. They had to have scripts and things like that. But they're using the technology, and it was a multidisciplinary approach to getting this project done. And so they had conferences with their parents. They practiced what they were going to say. So they're doing some public speaking. It was an amazing project. But they were doing this grade level wide thing. It was amazing.
When I was their age, I remember there was a computer lab in a separate room we all go to.
Yes.
And this is how you learn how to type.
Right.
And this was in second, third, fourth grade. Where they were teaching us this basics how to type. This is how you put a Word document.
Right, and now those computer labs are conference rooms because they don't have computer labs anymore, and it's in the hands of kids as that tool that they can use when they need to. And so that's kind of the way I look at it. It is a tool that teachers can use to expand the world that the kids get to look at. But at the high school level, I just know that when you and Dave were there and got that computer the first time when you were at Godwin, I remember as a parent sitting there and the teacher, it was a police officer, if you remember, that handed you your computer.
Was it Officer Woodcock then?
Right, exactly. And he talked about, you can't sell it. You can't go to a pawn shop and pawn these computers. There was a little medallion on the top showing.
It was on pretty secure.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Worried about GPS, about tracking it.
Exactly, and they were more worried about the possibility of them being sold, or stolen or whatever, than they were what the kids did with them. So those first computers weren't locked down at all, and I think it was November of that year, they took them all back, if you remember.
It was over winter break. I remember they took them back.
They took them back and went,
ooh. It very controlled, because before that, in class, people were playing Super Nintendo video games on the computers.
And do you remember the Matrix movie?
Oh, yes.
The Matrix movie was downloaded by so many people when those computers first came out, crashed the system.
Wow.
And so they had to take them back and decided, we better lock these down a little bit. There are certain words we need to block, and there are certain websites we need to block, and by then they realized.
I remember they were issued to computers, no controls, just open access to be able to do whatever they want.
Exactly.
And I remember for the first time in years, I was playing on the Super Nintendo emulator, Mega Man, which again, I didn't have a Super Nintendo growing up, but now I could just play Super Nintendo games. It was the coolest thing in the world.
Or you would have kids sit in class and iMessage each other across the room, and so when it was a great thing, but I think nobody really realized that was in the administration then that the kids are smarter than the adults at that point, and they knew what to do with them. And so they had to really make them secure, which today we don't have any of those problems. There's they're very secure. You can't even access Facebook if you're on a
That's
Henrico.
Probably for the better.
Right, it is.
Now all the students have their smartphones, though, and they can access that anyway by other means.
Exactly. But, but I just know that when my kids went to college, and I'm sure you experienced this the same, they sat down in a class right next to somebody who had their very first computer, and they're struggling. Because a lot of kids, when they go to college, it is their first computer.
Well, I'm sort of thinking in general about it. When I was in college, the way I get too easily distracted by a computer, so I would do notes by hand, because otherwise I knew I'd be on Facebook, surfing the web, checking out the news. So I did things the old-fashioned way. Mm-hmm.
And some people still do, and it's depends on your learning style. I think what works for you.
And just part of what I'm thinking about that going along the way is when they first came out with the laptop program in 2001 or 2000. Mm-hmm. I just wonder. I think back then it probably wasn't worth it. Again, this is retrospect.
Right.
There wasn't much online for resources for teaching back then.
Right.
And teachers were really pushing the limits, trying to find ways to use the computer. It wasn't that natural.
Right.
But today there's so many more options.
Absolutely.
There's so much more opportunity.
Educational games and software, and the research capabilities and the writing and that kind of thing. But I think that one of the things that we do is teachers share so much of the resources they have found to accomplish whatever lesson they're trying to teach. And so some of it's digital, some of it's not. And, we've gone away from a lot of textbooks because the information's on computers. And
What sort of impact would you say this has had on learning? Because I mean, with everything's a double-edged sword, especially with technology. I mean, there are pros, there are cons.
Sure.
Personally, I'm still old-fashioned. I like actual books in my hand. But,
I do when I'm reading. I do.
What's the status in the classroom here in Henrico with Switch going digital?
Well, I mean, with the teachers that I talk to they're all in. They love it. I really don't hear complaints from teachers much about being that we're in this digital world and we're doing this digitally. I think that it causes some issues for curriculum and for curriculum development, and that's one thing that we are working on, making sure that teachers have the resources they need, and that's I think especially been a big conversation with our new superintendent as she's gone around the county listening to the concerns of teachers. They say, well, we have our computers and we have some textbooks, and the textbooks are out of date as soon as they're printed, of course.
Oh, yes.
But, getting the online digital resources, we've got these computers now, give us the rest of what we need. And so that's been a big focus, assessing what are those needs. And I think curriculum across the board to achieve the SOLs, how can we provide our teachers with that so they're not having to make it up, they're not having to individually find all of the resources that are available. So we have
they don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly.
Each person.
Exactly. So we have within the school network, there's a sharing, essentially. There's a place you can go. You can drop the material, just like Dropbox or something like that. But basically, if you create a lesson on a particular topic, and let's say you're a math teacher, you can drop that lesson there for everybody to share. And so that's been wonderful. We've been doing that for a couple of years now, and I think that has really helped.
That's such
teachers.
a great idea, where a teacher creates something, share it, make it available.
Absolutely.
It's not just their classroom, their world. They can bring it with others.
Right.
That's wonderful.
Well, and then, it's based on the equipment that everybody has in every school. And so, again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It is something that I think not enough teachers honestly take advantage of. And some will create this thing and they get so busy they don't put it in there for sharing. But that's one thing that we're working on, is making sure that more people do that. And then we have a curriculum-based instruction. But get the curriculum in there, make sure the teachers have access to it. And so let's say, for example, you're teaching that math class and you're teaching algebra, and these are the things, the SOLs that you have to cover during that class. But let's make sure you have the materials to get there. And we've done that very much at the elementary level. It's amazing. The materials that teachers have now to make sure that kids are reading on grade level by third grade, and doing a lot of the planning and resource development for teachers, so they don't have to do it.
I'd like to just go into something that I've thought about.
Sure.
And rarely like to hear from the inside view. Mm-hmm. That is, it's never before have students at such a young age been so empowered to learn so much. Mm-hmm. They have so many tools at their disposal. Right. And I see kids doing things, as you were saying earlier, with laptops that, right. For us, I mean, oh my God, this laptop. The fact there was a laptop in the classroom, right. Even though as a teacher, that was a big deal. Yet at the same time, there seems to be a perception that kids today aren't being able to as strong standards. They aren't learning as much as kids were taught 50 years ago. Again, maybe is it just nostalgia about the good old days? Is there a truth to that?
I really don't think there is a truth to that. I am constantly amazed because I'm in schools all the time. I mean, we had a school board meeting last night. We had a group of students from Deep Run High School come and talk to us. So impressive. And they had concerns to share. They were so well spoken. They put their thoughts together, very cohesively. And there's always a time limit when you have, public forum opportunities and you have opportunities to speak. To be fair to everybody, we're going to give everybody 4 minutes. That's what the rule is. And these kids didn't even take 4 minutes. They got their point across, but they were advocating for STEM education. and they were advocating for more science and technology and more just in the classroom. But I was just so impressed with their love of education. And this is the Blue Cheese Robotics team. They are awesome. And so we have kids. Every time I encounter the kids that are in our schools, I can't believe that they're learning less. Oh my gosh, they're so impressive. And just in a few weeks, we'll have Student Government Day, where I will have a student from one of the high schools, either Tucker or Deep Run, shadow me all day. We will have a mock school board meeting, and they become the school board member. And so they get to learn what my job is like, but we get to spend the day with a group of fantastic kids. And so I'm always impressed with how mature they are, how much they know, how advanced they are. So yeah, no, I don't think I don't think they're not learning.
Let's talk about students learning, because one of the reasons I'm a product of Henrico County Public Schools. My wife and I came back here because of the school quality to raise a family here.
That's what you want.
Exactly. Now, how do you know students are learning? I remember under the Allen administration, the SOLs came out.
Oh yeah. And
standardized tests. Yet, there's a whole push. Let's have standardized tests to see if students are learning.
Right.
Now, the past few years, there's been a huge blowback against that. And,
right.
Obviously, you want to make sure students are learning. Mm-hmm. Yet, at the same time, how do you go about that in a way that doesn't limit teacher freedom? So, what are your thoughts on SOLs and that whole issue?
Right. There's a fine line. You can test kids to death. I am not a fan of that. Nobody I know is. And I think we went through a period of time where we were testing kids so much that we had end of the 9-week tests, we had tests at the end of the semester, plus the SOLs, plus standardized tests, for their intelligence tests and growth tests, all these tests. It was crazy. But I was teaching when the SOLs came out, and as a interesting thing. It was interesting to me at the time. I was initially not a fan. I thought, the fact that we're going to, on this particular day, assess, it's a snapshot, this momentary snapshot of what kids know. But I had a conversation that completely turned my way of thinking. I was talking to a friend of mine who lives on the Eastern Shore, and she was so thankful that the SOLs were coming at this time. And I was like, it's going to be so rigid. We're going to have to teach these particular things and all of that. And she said, and I am so grateful for that. And so in the course of the conversation, which was many with her, she explained to me that in counties not like Henrico, where we have a great deal of attention placed on our schools, we know that as our schools go, our county goes as far as health and attracting businesses and attracting families. She was in a...
Do you mind moving a little closer to the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that better?
No, thank you.
She lives in a county relatively poor. Not a lot of money was able to be spent on schools. Not a lot of attention paid to schools. And in the county she lives in, on the Eastern Shore, a lot of migrant workers, things like that, where you've got an itinerant population that moves in for a while and then they leave. And that presents a lot of challenges. And so anyway, she said, if we are held to the same standard, and that standard is a minimum standard, and that's what a lot of people forget with the SOLs, it is a minimum standard.
Oh, yes.
So from Wise County to the Eastern Shore, all across the state, we're at that same minimum standard, then we can assure those kids that they are learning that minimum. And you hope that they go above and beyond that minimum. But in her county, when they first started the SOLs, they didn't even meet the minimum. And so she's like, this is making us raise the bar. This is making us enhance our curriculum. This is forcing what the community wanted to make sure our kids are getting to that minimum. And so you had counties that, like Henrico, who have always had schools that perform at the minimum and above. But you had counties in Virginia that were performing below the minimum. So it gave us at least that place to shoot for. And so I thought, well, for those counties that our poorer counties that don't have, a ton of money to throw into their schools, and education wasn't a priority. It forced them to get there. And so now everybody across the state buys into that program. Yes, our schools are important.
So it really sounds like that, to summarize, the issue isn't the test itself, but the execution. You're doing it properly.
Exactly.
It's a good idea. You just have to do it right. Can't
Exactly.
do it too much of a good thing.
Exactly.
Not enough.
And so, it's taken a number of years to get it right. And we're at the point now where people are beginning, and I think that, like, for the Virginia Department of Education is realizing you don't necessarily have to assess every year. So what they're doing is they now have waivers. If your school, for example, has passed an SOL test well for a number of years, then maybe we'll go to every other year, every third year, whatever that is. And so waivers were created so we're not always having to test. And so I think there's been a little bit of calming down. Okay, everybody across the state is performing to that. We're holding them to that minimum standard. We're making sure that education is available to all of our students, and it's a good one, and it's sound. There are sound things we want to be able to teach. So now let's make it better. And I think so. What over the last few years, and it seems like every year or two they change the way accreditation is labeled, and so people have to. And so they've just done it again. But I think part of it is understanding those labels, and when your school is accredited, what does that mean? And now you add on top of it, it's levels 1, 2, and 3 for math. How many kids passed math, level 1, level 2, level 3, and that kind of thing. So the levels, we need to make people understand what those accreditation labels mean. But the fact that you're accredited, and Henrico is now 90% of its schools are accredited. We have a few more to go to be completely accredited, and that's important. People look at it before they move here. But you also, I think the educational community as a whole is looking at testing as it's a necessary evil to make sure we're living up to the charge that we're given of educating students properly. But maybe we don't have to do it quite as often. Let's make sure. So there's been a lot of movement in the General Assembly to change the method of the testing and to ease up a little bit on the pressure that we put on our teachers, which I think has really helped a lot over the last few years.
Yeah, I remember taking the SOLs as a student, and recalling what you said is the minimal standard. I came over from a private school to go into high school, from private to public, so I had to take some SOLs to see where I was, or for whatever reason.
Right.
And it was a joke. But I realized that for a lot of people, though, it might be very differently situated based on the schools they're in.
Yeah, because not everybody passes them.
And it's great what you're saying that there are standards, but also different areas have different needs.
Exactly. And you want to be sure. And that's the thing that I learned through this conversation with this teacher, and I really looked into it at the time after talking to her. Like I said, Wise County, from southwestern Virginia, in the more rural, poorer areas of Virginia. You want to be sure that they still have that access to a great education. And that's what the SOLs ensure. And so I began to it does serve a purpose. It's a necessary evil, like I said.
We've talked about somewhat the evaluation of the schools, with the standards, evaluation of the students. Now you know what's going next, the unpopular topic, though, but the evaluation of teachers. I've been lucky to have some great teachers, but I've also had some teachers who I wish were fired and maybe even institutionalized.
I understand. Sure.
Like any area, most are great.
Right.
Not all are,
right.
And the ones that aren't, how do you identify those teachers, and how do you act accordingly? I know this isn't a popular topic to talk about, but it's one that's...
but we have to, sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, we have thousands of employees, and so one of the things that over the last few years have changed for our teachers is the way they are evaluated. And I think we're in a sort of transitional phase right now of evaluation of teachers. There's no standard across the nation, across the state. Each county does its own thing. And so right now for us, it's building level principals are in charge of evaluating their teachers, the effectiveness of those teachers. They mainly do that. There's a form, of course, there's got to be a form, but there's a form you have to fill out. You go in, you watch lessons that the teachers are teaching. You see them in action. And then after that, conferences with the teachers asking a lot of questions about, how did you come at this way of teaching the thing that you just taught, that I just saw you teach, so to speak. And so that evaluation phase of teachers is done cooperatively. It's done very open with the principal and the teacher working together as a positive, trying to, to make it as positive as possible. It's learning for the teacher and for the principal. And so it's all about self-improvement. And so not everybody's perfect. You're going to find teachers that probably should be in another career. That happens. It happens in every industry, every business. And since we do have thousands of employees, when we find a teacher that is struggling for whatever reason, we offer support first. And there might be a mentor teacher that we partner them with. We might have administrators who will come in and help them and co-teach with them. Say, just watch what I do. And so that oftentimes solves the problem. And so I think we're doing that more often because we need to be proactive to make sure that, that teacher is strong in delivering the material she's supposed to deliver. But sometimes if it's not working, you have to have that hard conversation. So we do have different levels of support we can give a teacher. And so whether they're on working with a mentor or it gets more serious where they're co-teaching with someone, then after a while we have to, their administrator and their people, the directors that are high school, middle school.
I'd like to go a little further into, if you could explain the details of how are teachers who, again, I have to give the caveat, most are great. When you do find the rare exception to that, though, who isn't measuring up, how do you identify them? What exactly is the process?
Well, it's through that observation process. Their administrator has watched them in action. Sometimes, you might get a clue, obviously, from parents who say, there's a problem in this classroom.
Or is it the SOL results as well? Or
not as often as you might think. It's not, we obviously, the SOL results for every kid in the county. And if you see that there's one class of kids who are really struggling in a particular area, one of the things that we can do is drill down and find out what is that. And so that's really a nice part now of the SOL reporting that we get. We can find, for example, if in, let's say, a particular second grade in a whole school, you've got 5 second grade classes, and there's on every one of those tests, the kids struggled with this particular topic. You can actually go back now, reteach it, and that's the key, is you want to be sure that they don't miss that skill. So instead of just, for example, letting them take the test over again, which you couldn't do previously. A couple years ago, the Department of Education realized that one of the things that was missing from the whole SOL discussion was, what do you do with the results? What is it teaching you? What are we getting out of it? Why are we doing this if we don't do anything with it? So now you can look at across the board each skill, and if there's something that was really lacking, let's say fractions. Let's just use fractions.
That's very appropriate for many out there in the world still today.
Right. You can go back, actually reteach that topic, and then let the kids who struggled with the test take the test again. But you have to reteach them first. So then you can then assess, yes, we're successful now. That we did reteach them. Now they have that skill. Once they've retaken the test, we can see, did they get it? So we're actually using the test to be sure that they have the knowledge that they need to move forward. And so that's that's one really positive thing. Sorry, in my view, is that we're using it to assess, are we being successful in our teaching?
So I'm learning a lot from our conversation, but I'm also learning a lot about doing the podcast. As I said, this is the inaugural episode.
Yep.
I'm going to get a leather cover or some sort of soft cover on the tail, because I know a lot of people like to gesture, pounce on it. There's some vibrations coming through when you do.
Oh, is it really? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I am a talker with my hands, yes.
That's fine. So just want to be a little aware of that.
Okay, gotcha.
Thank you. So this is a learning process for me as well. So,
but I mean, I just find that like I said, the SOL is evolving, and how we use them, it's evolving. And
now, it's going on to we've talked about standardized tests, evaluations.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about Common Core. So I'm not going to ask a leading question here. Just what are your thoughts on Common Core?
Well, I'm not a fan, and I've done a fair amount of research on Common Core, and I have an uncle who lives in Oklahoma, and where I told you my son was this morning, and it was interesting talking to him about Common Core. They were a Common Core state, and have ultimately rejected Common Core. Part of that, I think, the problem with it is a little bit inflexible in the way you teach, and that was I've met some teachers. I went to the National School Board Conference twice, and I've talked to was able to talk to other school board members, which was fascinating. They're in Common Core states. And what they have found is, and what they relayed to me, was that there's a right way to do something. And if you don't do it the right way, there could be multiple ways to do a math problem, for example. But if you don't do it the Common Core way, it's wrong.
Weird.
Yes.
So it doesn't award ingenuity, creativity.
Exactly. And, there's a more scripted way of teaching. So a lot of creativity in teaching is squelched. And so the school board members that I talk to, they like it from one perspective, just like I liked the SOLs when they started. They don't have anything else. Virginia does. And so when you don't have anything else to hold as a standard, that minimum standard for your state, I can understand why some people turn to the Common Core, because they didn't have anything else to guide them. The way the curriculum is written, though, is a little more, it's much more scripted. It is, so I think the creativity piece of it is important. And so that's the beauty of, if there is one, you can say that, of the SOLs, is it does allow for some creativity. You have a standard you need to teach, and then there might be suggestions. But if you've got a student who's an auditory learner, and they learned by talking through and giving, oral presentations and things like that, they can do that under the SOLs. Or if you have a student who's a very visual learner, you might decide to teach your lesson in a visual way. And there's just, I think, more opportunities for creativity and individualization of instruction.
Something that I've just observed, I like to get your input on, is that, what you're saying about Common Core is completely correct. It limits flexibility of teachers, of students, of parents.
Right.
Yet at the same time, a lot of the people often pushing for Common Core are the same ones who are criticizing the lack of flexibility because of standardized tests in general.
Well, and see, that's the thing. It's to me, what is your view on standardized testing? And if you see, and I think the way that the SOLs have changed over the last few years with allowing reteaching and to make sure that we use the data that we have to drive our instruction. If your kid already knows how to do fractions, you don't have to teach it to death. But if your kid is struggling with fractions and shows that the tests show that, yes, that kid's struggling with fractions, then yes, we can target what your kid is missing.
I really like where you're going on to that, because it's something else I'd like to talk about. and that is giving each student individualized attention.
Right.
Different students have different needs.
Right, they do, and they have different learning styles, and you can't teach human beings in a cookie cutter fashion. You just can't.
Oh God, no! I'm
I
sorry.
mean,
I think that
we're all different.
Well, for me, that's a very personal story because I have attention deficit disorder, and I don't need medication as an adult. Well, maybe I need it if I'm not on it as an adult.
Right.
But I definitely did as a child, and I could learn. I just had to do things a very different way.
Right.
Teachers have worked with me differently.
Right.
And I hope every child gets the same opportunities I had.
Right.
Because had that flexibility not been there, I might not be in a different place.
Well, and I think that's one of the problems with Common Core. And it's, when you're not a creative teacher, it's difficult. And so, I think we have to open that door for people to use their creativity. That's one thing people love about being a teacher, is that you can bring your skills to bear, and other teachers that you work with, your coworkers, will have those skills. You bring them all together, and it's a thing of beauty sometimes. I mean, when you put 5 teachers in a room, something good's going to happen most often. And so I think you need to allow for that. And, in the schools that I go to, it's amazing what our teachers are doing. And if you just give them the resources that they need and the ability to be creative, boy, they will run with something.
I like that idea. I mean, what I love about teaching for VCU is that I've given some very rough instructions.
Right.
And I have pretty much pure autonomy and freedom with it.
You make it.
Yeah, but now, so if I weren't doing a good job, they're free to fire me then.
Sure.
Get rid of me if I'm not measuring up. Otherwise, they say, look, here's the goal. How you meet it, it's up to you.
Right.
There are evaluations, there are standards. Students do their own rating of me every semester.
Right.
And they haven't fired me yet, so doing something right there.
Well, that's a good thing.
Oh.
Well, I mean, I think that's what I love about teaching, and I think when I talk to teachers, that's the thing that they embrace the most, is the individualization, the ability to bring your strengths to a job and then make a difference in the life of a child. I mean, it's so rewarding.
Now, thinking about individualization, though, especially when it comes to special ed, some students need a lot more individualized attention.
Right.
Can you talk about, my brother was more so than myself, needed special ed for the driving test.
Right.
He just couldn't see it on a board, how to go through the course for driver's ed. But he actually had a teacher literally go out there on the course with him, walk him through it, and he could pass it just fine.
Right.
It's strange things like that make a world of difference in someone's life.
Well, when I was a reading teacher at Short Pump, I had a couple of kids who had a condition. I don't know if you've ever heard it. It's called dysgraphia.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of it.
Right.
Why don't you explain it?
Dysgraphia, you have difficulty basically with making your handwriting legible and getting words on paper. And so a lot of kids who have that, they function better. For example, when they can use a computer, they can type. And so, and words make more sense to them if they use a keyboard. And so I had a couple of different kids come to me. They were struggling in reading. So I had to figure out, well, what is the problem? And that was my task oftentimes with my kids, was they were not learning to read, but it was also, they knew basic letters and that kind of thing, but forming those letters into words and making their brains understand, that word makes sense. And if you look at a pencil in reality and the word pencil, those two things are related. And so anyway, I had a couple of kids who they came to me because they weren't learning and they weren't progressing in reading, and I discovered that they had dysgraphia. And so when they would see words on a page, it didn't look like the thing they had written. And so we had to work through those issues. And so oftentimes with special ed kids, part of the challenge is finding out what is the issue. If it's a learning disability, is it something more involved? And so I think that's, the first start. And the younger you can identify those issues.
I guess teachers are in increased training to recognize that. Can you talk about that? I'm sure that's of great interest to anyone with a child in Henrico County Public Schools or considering it. What sort of training and background do our teachers
it's incredible. Well, first, you get all that training in college, but then once you get on the job, there's even more training. And we offer training to our teachers in professional development. It is ongoing. And as more research is done, that kind of thing, especially in the world of autism, as more kids are identified as autistic and, you get on the autism spectrum and you're working with individuals who are struggling in whatever way that they are. But I'm a big believer in you teach the child that comes to the door as they are. And that is your job. That is your task. And you're not going to change the child. You don't want to, but you want to meet the needs that they present you with. And so, that means we have a lot of needs to meet, and every individual child has different needs. So that teacher has to be trained in identifying what those needs are and figuring out, okay, this child has these needs. These are the resources available to meet that child's needs. So yes, a lot of training is involved, and we try to keep the classes small and the supports there for the teachers.
What percentage of students these days, at least for Henrico County, are qualify as special needs?
I honestly don't know the actual numbers.
I understand it's about 20%.
That's what I was going to say. It's right around 20% is what I was going to say. That was what my memory was telling me.
And I say this so myself, who was special needs at ADD. It seems that's an alarming rate that's gone up. So it's a question, are we just better at identifying it?
I think so, yes, especially in the autism spectrum. We're better at identifying it. Back when I was young, back in the dark ages, there was a class, and you put all the kids who either were learning disabled or they had a special need, and they were in the class. And when I was teaching the first few years, we had an LD class, learning disabled. There were kids of all abilities in there, and a teacher had to be a jack of all trades. And thankfully, for the betterment of the education of kids, we don't just stick them in a class anymore and say, okay, you're off by yourself. Those kids are in every classroom because that's what's best for kids, is to be with everybody together and learning together. And research has shown that is the way to go. And
that's real interesting. I'm sorry, I'm just analogizing this to my line of work in criminology. Mm-hmm. The latest research shows if you take a bunch of criminals, violent, angry people, especially men, and if you put them all together in the same place, secluded off, they come out even worse.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Find ways to integrate.
Well, if you think about it, my kids were always, today we call them collaborative classes. You'll have a class of every level of kid, from the gifted kid to the kid who's struggling. And you might pull kids out for specialized instruction. For example, if you've got a kid who's ADD, for example, or you have a kid who is struggling in math or reading, and that's what I did at Short Pump, was help kids with math and reading. You would pull them out for specialized small group instruction to meet their needs. And then the rest of the day, they're with their peers. Because, the worst thing you can do to a kid is make them feel different and label them something, just because, and I heard this term just recently that I absolutely love. Instead of saying they're disabled, they are differently abled. And I actually heard parents, this was just within the last couple of weeks, and everybody's differently abled in one way or another. And so, celebrate our differences as opposed to isolate kids because of their differences. So while you might have to pull some children out for gifted instruction, you might also need to pull out special ed kids for instruction in math or one of the core subject areas. But then the rest of the day, they're with their peers, and they're just like every other kid.
Moving on to a somewhat related but slightly different topic. What's the role of all the guidance counselors? What are they doing in schools? Now, I say this with a grain of salt because my own personal experience was very negative. I remember it was maybe freshman or sophomore year at Galvin High School. I was telling my guidance counselor I want to go to maybe this college or that college. And she said to me, yeah, that sort of thing, college isn't for people like you. And, the irony is now I'm a professor, even
Yeah,
part-time.
that hurts me. Yeah.
Well, again, that's
Sorry
my
to hear that.
that's my experience with it. Otherwise,
Right.
I had no positive interaction or memories of guidance counselors.
Right. Well,
So I hope I'm in a boat by myself for that one. What are they doing? What is their
well,
role?
I think we're in a phase of transition. We realize, and there's more and more discussion of the value of a guidance counselor. But I think for years, guidance counselors were tasked with scheduling, making sure you got in this class, that class, whatever, and that's a huge job. They were also tasked with, when it was time for college, getting your college applications. So a lot of paperwork. I mean, when you get right down to it, you didn't go to college and become a guidance counselor to make sure that a kid's college application had all of the parts it needed. So there's a lot of tedious paperwork that we were asking our guidance counselors to do. Less and less counseling and more paperwork. And so I think over the last, 10 years probably, that there's been a real transition and a real realization that there are mental health challenges, there are anxiety issues, there are problems that kids have that they need someone to talk to about. And so the value of guidance counselors, because that's what they're there for. They are there to help kids with problems, with social issues, whatever it is. If it's a socialization problem and you're not getting along with anybody, you don't feel like you fit in, there are things that guidance counselors can help you with. And it's not like we have a therapist for everybody, but it's someone who is going to listen and then help you solve that problem, whatever it might be. And while, yes, it's important that someone is listening and helping you figure out your path of which classes you want to take in high school, but they shouldn't be the ones checking off the box to be sure you have all your recommendations, for example. And so one of the especially recent pushes has been to add more guidance counselors, but give them the ability to counsel, to be there for kids, to help them through the tough times, to be the facilitator of, let's say, for example, your family's going through a crisis, and a lot of kids have things going on at home that would make us all cry, and they need help, they need support. So what supports are available to families, that kind of thing. And there's just more and more need of that. And I think as that comes forward, we're putting more emphasis on actually letting our guidance counselors do that instead of, and I can't believe one ever told you not for you, but you
didn't know me that really in high school, so maybe it was a little different back then.
Well, I think it's evolving, thankfully, the job that guidance counselors are doing. We have psychologists. I mean, there's, I think a lot of it comes down to the realization that kids do have so many issues. And, sad to say, some of it is the school shootings that have brought this to light. That kids they're suffering in some way. They've been bullied. They've had, something happen in their lives that's tragic.
So you've hit on two topics I do want to talk about. Bullying, especially the incident at Short Blunt Middle School.
Right.
That made national news.
Yes, it did.
But before we do that, let's talk a bit about that. So schools have been hiring more counselors, been increasing psychologists, and I know the administration costs have swelled.
Oh, they have, absolutely.
But are we seeing any outcome as far as students receiving better education, more opportunities? Because I know a lot of parents are looking at that,
right?
Saying we're spending all this money more than any other nation, it seems, for education, but are we getting out of it?
The bang for the buck, in other words.
Especially on admin instead of putting it to the classroom.
Right. Well, I mean, I think part of the problem is that in today's society, you think about it, parents are working, they're busy, they need supports oftentimes. Their economic challenges whatever the parents are facing, the family unit, so to speak, is you're not sitting around the table every night like, Ward and June Cleaver used to do. And you've got working parents, you've got families with challenges, and so the kids are oftentimes not getting the support at home they might need. So schools have to fill in, and they go to their teachers, they go to guidance counselors or administrators for a little bit of support, and they go to their friends, anybody that they can find, and they need someone they can confide in. And the number of kids with anxiety issues and depression, and those numbers of kids with those problems, it's amazing.
So a recent study coming out about millennials being through the roof, highest rates of anxiety, depression, various other issues. It's alarming.
Well, I mean, if you think about the pressure that society puts on kids to succeed, and I think so many parents these days try to be their kid's friend instead of their parent. And so many parents, got a lot of single-family homes. Think about Henrico in itself is 44% free and reduced lunch. That's families with economic challenges. And those are the ones who filled out the paperwork. There are still families beyond that who have economic challenges. And those economic challenges affect the way the kids interact with other people every day. It's surprising. And I've talked to a lot of different families about this. There are families who are, mom and dad are worried about putting dinner on the table. They're worried about getting to work. Do they have a job? Do they have these issues? And 3rd, 5th, 10th on their list is, did Susie do her homework tonight? So education sometimes takes a step down in priority from making sure your family is safe and provided for.
Okay.
And so some of that is causing a lot of anxiety and depression about kids. They see more, their parents talk to them more about the challenges of life, and that makes kids afraid. It makes them insecure.
Well, let's talk about safety at school. There's been a huge public awareness increase for bullying. The school shootings have raised alarms as well as issues concerning race and diversity.
Right.
As well as a push for something called equity.
Right.
Now, there was an incident at Short Pump Middle School. Yep. I know it's been politicized greatly, but I'd like to hear, what was what's the real story? What's going on? What was the response?
Well, I was chairman of the school board when that happened, and
why don't you also, for those unfamiliar with the incident we're referring to?
There was a video. If I remember right, it was right around 13 seconds. That a kid shot in the football in the locker room before football practice at Short Pump Middle, and there was a lot going on in that locker room. If you listen to it, there's a lot of chaos in general, and no adults in the room. Beginning of the problem, and the kids videotaped themselves simulating sex acts on each other, and which is distressing enough. But you could see as you watched the video that some kids were holding other kids down. And, at first, you realize the kids are all laughing, hysterically laughing. But it's that nervous kind of hysterical laughter. It's not laughter of, this is funny for some of the kids. Other kids, I guess it was. But there's this nervous laughter of, I'm uncomfortable. This is not really funny. And you could see the look on the kids' faces. This was an uncomfortable situation that they found themselves in, and they just were sort of like, okay, this too shall pass, was the look on these kids' faces. But again, it's only 13 seconds or roughly that we had the video. But something happened before that and something after that. And so that's one of those days that when you're on the school board, you get a phone call, and you realize, okay, I just woke up, I'm in my pajamas, and you realize 6 hours later you're still in your pajamas, and you know this is one of those days. And It's an eye-opening thing. You can't believe you've just witnessed this, and you can't believe that the kids did this. But at the end of the day, you need to get to the root cause. What made the kids think this was okay? And
Well,
so,
just my observation, interjection. I was a camp counselor, kids about that age, and kids, sixth, seventh graders are the most evil, ruthless creatures on the
are.
planet. They sense weakness in one another, they pounce,
right, they're a little crazy.
and I mean, that's the most evil age.
Well,
I say that with nephews around that age, but still,
it's just like they go outside of their bodies, and they come up with this. And honestly, when I was going through this process with all the other people that were involved in it, I kept saying to myself, what made the kids, okay, we're going to do this? This was what decision process happened that...
Well, we know they're 12-year-olds. What decision process?
Right, exactly. With what I came up with, there was no thought.
I mean, tell kids that age, this is something bad, don't do it. What's the first thing they're going to do?
It's exactly right. And you give them a room with no adults.
Oh, yeah.
Which, as part of the investigation of all of this, it was sort of the perfect storm of lack of supervision, because each of the people that were supposed to be in that room thought that the other person was in the room. And of course, one of the football coaches in a traffic jam didn't get there on time. So he was supposed to be there. The other coaches thought he was there, and nobody was there. And so, you've got to have backup systems that work. And that didn't that day. And but getting to the racial overtones
Because my understanding wasn't this simulated sex acts that bother people. And I'll just say, being a former middle school boy in a middle school locker room, people do dumb stuff.
They do dumb stuff.
It's the racial part that really upset people.
It was
something different.
And it was not only what the kids were doing, it was what they were saying. And ultimately, somebody took that video and it superimposed words over the top. That was done after.
Was it somebody, we think one of the kids who had a cell phone?
Yeah,
okay.
Well, yeah. And so when they posted it, they added words to it. And there was also audio that was added later. So when you put all of that together, you had something pretty terrible. And so the first thing I spent hours talking to parents. And that was the first thing. Yes, my child's in that video, one way or the other. Were they the perpetrator? Were the one they were talking about, the one doing the talking, all of that. And so, our first reaction was to let everybody on that team know this is not acceptable, period. End of subject. We're not going to talk about, but. No, there is no but. That kind of behavior, not acceptable. And I think that's...
I'm sorry, I'm just thinking about a governor who could have gotten that message 30-some years ago.
Oh,
a little off topic.
Absolutely. And, I think with kids, one of the things you have to do in an instance like this is come out firm and say, okay, in the case of the football team, your football team season is over. There were enough kids involved in this that you couldn't just pick out one or two. That's impossible.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that, because I was going to ask about that, because someone who wasn't involved, they probably felt it was very unfair.
Oh, yeah. And I heard from those parents, and I talked to them. And I talked to a lot of parents. I don't know if I talked to everybody on the football team, but just about. And the kids who were already outside, but everybody on that team knew. And everybody on that team knew that this had happened. There were a lot of kids in that locker room, a lot. And while at that age, I'm sure it's very hard to say, you're not doing a thing that you should leave that kid alone or stop or something. But, you don't stand there and laugh like it's okay. So the strong message was sent not only to that team, but to all kids. These guys crossed the line. So they're going to be accountable for their actions. And you hope that when you do something like that, it also sends the message to other kids like, okay, I get it. This is not, we expect more from our students. And when we decided to end the football season, we didn't do it as a punishment for everybody. That was a very specific thing for those kids that you crossed the line. This is unacceptable behavior you just don't treat people that way. And you don't talk about other people the way these kids were talking about their classmates or about anybody. You just don't. And we can't tolerate that kind of racial slurs. It was awful to hear it. And so it was a clear message to those kids. We expect better of you.
Fortunately, that incident, being bad enough as it was, drew unwanted media attention.
Oh.
And again, just like how lately Virginia's been in the news because of
Right.
our governor, lieutenant governor, and
Right.
attorney general, it put
Right.
Henrico County, specifically Short Pump Middle, in the news
Under the
as well.
microscope, absolutely. Well, and I mean, like I said, I was chairman of the school board then, and I heard from people all over the world, either by email or by phone call. I don't know how many, but I answered every phone call and every email and tried to be as honest and open as we could be. We had a community meeting. We did everything we could to make it as transparent as possible, but also respect the privacy of these children, because at the end of the day, there were children in that video, and you have to protect their privacy and make sure that faces were blurred in the video and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, I mean, sometimes some of the details are impossible for me to talk about because of privacy laws. And so people have asked me, what happened to the kids? I can't tell you. I can't say, well, so-and-so was punished in this way. There were consequences. Some we can talk about, like the end of the football season, but how the students who are in that video, and we ultimately found out other students, how they were, we can't talk about that.
Well,
but there were consequences. I can be general.
I say 11, 12, 13-year-olds, they tend to be pure balls of evil. That being said, they don't stay 11, 12, 13 forever. They grow up, they learn. It's a learning opportunity.
Exactly.
I don't actually think, they're not really evil at that age.
Right.
We might, because, their brains are literally still developing.
Right.
They're learning, and
you want to have a consequence, but it's not, you don't want to end their lives. It's like, yes, there is life after this. We can grow, we can learn, we can move forward. And so we tried really hard to stress that. And so, for example, we had the Virginia Community and Schools came into Short Pump, and we had learning sessions for parents. We had counseling session with kids. We had a lot of follow-up conversations about this incident, and it sparked a lot of learning for kids of not only racially, but how do we treat each other with respect in all ways. And that's
Henrico County
valuable.
also added a new position as well.
Yes, diversity and equity.
There's some not some, but a fair amount of controversy.
Yes, there was.
About creating a position of equity. Now, I'm all for equal opportunity, but when I see people pushing for equity, I'm not exactly sure what each person means by that. I have a lot of concerns because of the people espousing a lot of the talk about equity.
Sure. Well, to me, it's not on racial lines. I mean, you think about it, Henrico County is an incredibly diverse county. There are, in our schools, 87, I think it was at last time I counted, different countries represented, 105 languages. So I look at it as more equity of opportunity. That's what we've tried to make.
What does that mean, equity of opportunity?
Okay. Well, and that's really an important thing to distinguish. I think it's not that. Let's say this is not truly a black and white issue. We want to be sure that every kid, like I said earlier, when they come to the door, that's the kid you're teaching. And where they come from, what language they speak, is who they are. And so you need to teach them to where their needs are at that time. So if they're from another country and they don't speak English, you're going to educate them anyway, because that's what they deserve. And so it is.
That's a point of law.
Well, it is.
They're legally
It is
entitled to as well.
Exactly.
So it's not just legal. I think morally, when children are here, we educate them.
Right. So that child, whoever it is, deserves the equity of opportunity to learn just like any other child. And so no matter what your address is, no matter what your economic status is, you have the opportunity to succeed and learn just like any other child.
So is equity of opportunity different from equality of opportunity?
Not really. Very different. I mean, to me, it's just it's the same thing. But we want to be sure that and it's a good example. If you are at Varina High School and Deep Run High School, opposite ends of the county, and let's say, for example, you want to take a certain class, and at Deep Run, 5 kids want to take it, and at Varina, 3 kids want to take it. But are you going to hire 2 teachers to teach that one class? Probably not, for 5 and 3. So let's say, for example, one of the things we're working on is having virtual classrooms. Okay, we want to set up a teacher. Let's say they're at Varina, but the kids at Deep Run can also take that class virtually. So that's giving them all the opportunity to take a class. Or there's a field trip, and it costs money. So you want to be sure there's funding for the kids who are economically disadvantaged and can't afford that field trip, but other kids can afford to take that field trip. So, okay, fine. We're going to have ability for those kids to have support to take that. So you're making sure that they all have the same opportunities, no matter what challenges they might have or what country they come from or what language they speak. So that's, to me, some of the work that equity department is looking into, making sure that there aren't barriers in place for those kids.
That's interesting. Okay, I know words have very specific and unique meaning to each individual. I want to be sure we're talking the same language.
Right.
And this is something that's really come up among cultural wars the past few years. And at VCU, they have this Office of Equity and Inclusive Excellence.
Right.
And, I don't like politics in education. I just think you teach the facts, you teach the math, you teach the science, whatever it is. And they're pushing very much a political agenda that's not conservative or even liberal. It is very much a leftist, progressive agenda. And they're using key buzz phrases and literally pushing a dogma down people's throats. And it's just something I noticed on the university scene. And I was just very alarmed by that, and don't want to see that happening.
Right.
In Henrico County Public Schools, as social activists, I've been actively working in education, and they say get to the kids while they're young. Again, I hate how things have been politicized this day and age.
I do too.
Especially education. I look at what's coming out of VCU. And I wish people would get away from that. Now, I know that going to elections coming up, people will be pushing for that.
Well, and we've actually had conversations. I know the board has in general, and the message is sent down to teachers, leave your opinions at the door. Because let's take our president. It's a very polarizing person. And there might be somebody who supports President Trump, somebody who doesn't. But so what you do, and what we encourage teachers to do, is present the facts. The kids are going to make up their own minds, and we're not going to give them an opinion. And I am not an advocate of, yes, you want to have discussions. It should be open and all of that stuff. But I don't think it's right for our teachers to push their opinions on impressionable kids. I really don't.
Agree with that.
I really don't.
So one thing I tell my students, part of a standard speech, the first day of class, when I talk law, I talk about the most controversial issues in the world.
Right.
That's part of my job. I say, look, I'm not here to teach you what I think the law should be. I'm here to teach you what it is.
What it is.
Sometimes I'll agree with it. Sometimes I'll disagree with it.
Right.
And sometimes you'll agree or disagree. Whether you or I agree or disagree is irrelevant. It's the law.
Exactly.
Got to know it.
Right.
And again, I just get worried when people start pushing their politics because
I do too.
At VCU, I find what they're pushing to be a very racist, dogmatic agenda. And I truly mean that I find what they're pushing to be actual racist.
Right.
I don't mean racial superiority or anything like the traditional white supremacy look. They look around the room and say, okay, do I have enough black people? Do I have enough Hispanic people here?
Right.
And what are their positions? And like, who classifies people like that?
Right.
Take people as individuals.
Well,
I had
a very personal experience about this. It was when I was in college. I took classes at Virginia State University, and sometimes people are surprised. I lived in Colonial Heights. I went to Longwood, and I wanted to take classes in 2 summers and graduate in 3 years, which I did. So one summer I went to Longwood, took classes there. The second summer I went to Virginia State University. Back then it was just Virginia State. But so I was in the minority. That's mostly African American students at that school, and I'll never forget it. I was taking a history class, and the professor, honestly don't remember the topic, I just remember what he said, and he looked at me and he said, "So tell me the white view."
What crap? I'm sorry, that is
I just
such crap.
Paused, and I seriously, my mouth dropped open. I was one of 3 white people in the room. And the other students in the room just kind of gasped that he would put it that way.
I'm glad the other students recognize that.
Right.
That's not just wrong. That's immoral.
It was blunt, and
that's racist and depraved.
And I was really taken aback. And so, as it turned out, I honestly don't remember what he asked it. I just remember that he asked me that question. And I gave him my viewpoint, which happened to be very much like the viewpoint of everybody else in the class. And I asked him after class, I went up to him and I said, "I have to ask you, why did you single me out like that?" And he said, "Well, I want you to know what it's like, because it's done to us all the time." I couldn't believe he said this to me. And I said, "Well, by us, if you mean African Americans." And he said, "I do." And I said, "Well, I can tell you," I was 19 at the time. I said, "I can tell you in my life, I have never walked up to an African American person and said, 'Well, tell me the black view.' I would never do that." And I said, "I look at people as other people, and I hope they do the same to me." Truly, it was a transformative moment, because he taught me a lot. I mean, we had some spirited conversations, as you can imagine, but he and I had a long conversation about how that made me feel. And he said, "Well, I just wanted you to know how it feels to have somebody pull you out because of the color of your skin." And I said to him, I said, "Wouldn't it be nice if we could all be sitting in this academic setting and have that be left at the door?"
Every person who's paying attention in the world knows that there are statistical disparities in a number of areas across racial groups. There's no question about that. But I hate it when people make an assumption that based on the race of the individual in front of them, that person has certain views.
Right.
That itself is racist, because you're judging the person based on their skin color.
Right. Again, well, and that's what I told him eventually. I said, we got to a good place, and I told him, I said, "It really would be nice if you would not assume that I feel a certain way or not because of the color." I said, "I try really hard. You're my professor. I respect you, and I'm listening to what you say, and I'm learning from you." And he said, "Well, I just wanted to teach you a valuable lesson." And it was a valuable lesson for me in a lot of ways. But I have over the years had people that just can't believe I went to that university. And I was like, why wouldn't I go to that? I mean, I don't know. Why wouldn't I go there? There's no reason I wouldn't go there.
Education's an education.
Education,
that's the right place.
And that's why
you know what you're looking for.
That's why I truly believe you educate the child who comes to the door, no matter. And I try to not look at or judge people by the outside, and you don't want to do that if a child is from another country, if they're, I think that's what we're trying really hard to teach our teachers, and that we are a very diverse community, and that's a good thing.
A lot of the diversity comes from people who aren't part in the school system itself yet are of age. They've gone the homeschooling route.
Right, that's true.
And what are your thoughts on homeschooling? There's talk about the Tebow bills, participation, athletics.
Well, I have a really good friend of mine from high school homeschooled all of her children, and I've talked to her a lot about it. I haven't seen her in a while, but I did. That was her choice. It was religious reasons, and she felt like she and her husband thought it was important, and they homeschool. That's your right. If you want to homeschool your child, go right ahead. But I do think when you're ready for college, and I think this is the standard, I think it's right, that we need to be sure those kids have that foundational learning that they need to proceed on. So colleges have, their way of testing kids and be sure that they have the academic rigor and all of that. That's fine. But I do think if you have chosen to homeschool, there are resources for homeschool students. I'm not in favor of having homeschool students then only come to public schools for sports, for example. And part of that is because you don't know whether that student is in good standing. I mean, we do have academic requirements for participation in sports. You can't verify that student has met those same academic requirements, and that's one of the main concerns that people have is that student in good academic standing, and you've held some of the kids to that standard but not others, so you want to be sure that, again, that equity of opportunity, are we holding all of our students to the same standard?
That's interesting because I don't hear that argument often about when it comes to athletics and homeschoolers. Right. The argument that I often hear being pushed is that you don't get to pick and choose, or arguments, you're either in or you're out. If you want the benefits, you have to do the other part. Right. What are your thoughts on those arguments?
Well, I've heard that too. And I kind of feel like, they're still members of our community. They still pay taxes. I understand that. And I've had homeschool parents say, but I'm a taxpayer. I should be able to use the product of what my taxes pay for. But I do fall into that. That part to me is more goes to the academics, and so I don't buy into that. You're either in, you're out. That argument doesn't hold as much water to me as the academic side.
I like the argument
and the behavior side.
Well, the argument I really like to see when it comes to anything involving children, especially education, is what's in the child's best interest.
Right. Yeah, I understand.
What would be the best thing for that child?
Right.
Going about
well,
that.
And so, but the problem I have with that whole scenario with homeschooled students is, behavior aspect of it. For example, is we have a standard for participation in athletics, and if a child has had behavior problems or whatever, you can't verify those things with homeschool students, and that's where I come down on. There are other avenues.
Okay.
That's
speaking of other avenues in general for education, let's talk about vouchers. What are your thoughts?
Well, it is not an area I'm as familiar with because we don't have any. I have over the years become more and more open to the idea of charter schools. And I've actually talked with a lot of our administrators about the whole voucher system and charter schools and all of that. And there's this fear. Ultimately, what I have figured out is this fear that the more gifted students, for example, will start a charter school, and it'll be more like the 50s when the kids the elite or whatever
in the South in the 50s, the white kids were
exactly out they went to their own schools and that kind of thing.
Brief interjection of a quick story. My mother was a elementary school teacher shortly after City of Richmond desegregated. it might have been Robert E. Lee Elementary School she was teaching at. And there was a white flight out of many of the schools across the South, including the city of Richmond as well.
Right.
Now, again, somebody would argue that happened today, but...
Right. Well, I think there's this, like I said, there's this fear amongst some administrators and that kind of thing might happen again. And they want to go so far the other way that this is like, oh no, we're not going to charter schools in the voucher system where you can pick and choose where you get to go to school.
Well, I guess we're real lucky here in Henrico County that our schools are such top-notch high quality. I mean, they're listed in national rankings.
Right, absolutely.
That we don't have that conversation in other areas where schools are failing.
Right.
Or, are failing.
Right.
So we're in a good position.
I know, like, for example, my daughter-in-law grew up in Dallas, and she went to private school. That's her parents' choice. And I look at it that way. If your parents choose to send you to private school in Virginia, we have that choice. For whatever reason you choose to go to private school. And in some localities, they don't have those choices. But in Virginia, we have lots of choices. And between private schools or schools with a particular mission, then you can choose to go there. So I'm not sure in Virginia that it just really is a necessary thing to go that way. But I think one of the things that people worry about if you do vouchers or if you let families choose where they go to school is then you're taking funding away from the public schools.
That's actually the number one argument.
Right. You're not going to be able to meet the needs of the students who still are in our schools. And so what do we do then? It's going to be this perpetual, okay, then we have to raise taxes in order to, and then, it's just going to snowball from there. And I think, at least from what I've seen, there just hasn't been enough objective research, objective evaluation of how this would work. Usually anybody who talks about it has their own spin on it, and you can't get the spin out of there in order to really drill down to what's the truth.
Again, it's highly politicized.
I think that's part of the problem.
I want to see people just ask the question, what's in the child's best interest? Of course, what works for one child might be actually go into negative for another child.
Right.
Again, you have those conflicts of interest.
I think that's it gets all clouded by the politicization of it, and that's not even a
even
word.
If it's not political. I'm just thinking, let's say you have 10 children in the room, and you have a plan that's great for 9, but detrimental to one of them. That one child's parent will rightfully fight against any harm or anything that interferes with her child's education. Rightfully so.
Rightfully so. And so that's where I think it all breaks down, and why we haven't really solved or gotten to the bottom of this issue is that if you can't take the politics out of it and find out objectively how can we meet the needs of kids and still give somebody maybe what they want to do. And I just don't know if that's going to work. I just don't think we're there yet.
Well, speaking of politics, you're on school board as someone who taught.
Yes.
And also one of the delegates of Henrico County, Skylar Van Valkenburg, is a teacher as well. How does that help you do your job or him do his? What's that relationship like?
I have met with Skylar.
Also, Deborah, she teaches at the college level as well, worth mentioning.
And I've met with Skylar a couple of times. I haven't talked to Deborah as much, but it is actually, I think it's great to have a teacher in the General Assembly. They, Kirk Cox, who's Speaker of the House, and I went to high school together. I've known Kirk most of my life, and he was a government teacher for years. He's retired now, but I think that's wonderful to have a teacher there who knows what it's like to be in the classroom, who can give a different perspective. And that's, to me, what I bring to our school board. I'm the only one on the board who's been a teacher. Now, Bill Pike, who is our member right now from Tuckahoe, is filling out Lisa Marshall's term, has been a principal and has been in schools and all that. But before Bill joined the board, I was the only teacher. And, you bring a different perspective. And so to me, having Skylar there, I think it's great to have a teacher. I
know that as someone who does criminal defense, it drives me crazy when there are members of the General Assembly talk about issues that affect the criminal code. that
And they
have
don't really know.
It's very unfortunate.
Right.
It's not often you need more lawyers in certain areas, but there are some times where it's helpful.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, speaking of Pike, though, I know Lisa. Wish her a speedy recovery.
Absolutely.
Wish her the best of health. Filling her position, there was some controversy to that.
Yes, there was.
And let's go right to the controversy.
Okay.
What was going on?
Now, granted, a lot of that, again, is stuff I can't talk about. I'll talk about in generalities.
Okay, that's fair.
We had, I'm trying to remember exactly how many people applied. I don't even remember. It's like 13, 14. I can't remember. But the process that has been done before is exactly what we followed this time. To have everybody that applies, you fill out an application. You have to fill out all kinds of lengthy paperwork to be sure you don't have conflict of interest and all of that. And so we looked at all of it. We narrowed it down to a few people that came in and talked to us. And there were some people that were louder than others in their criticism of our process. But we didn't do the process any different than it has ever been done. And I don't know if they didn't know what had been done before, but ultimately what I heard was afterwards was, one person got more emails sent to the board than another. Well, it's not only about the number of emails I get, because it is a multifaceted process. We met with each person. We talked to them at length. They had to answer questions, and that
what sort of questions?
Well, for example, you might ask them generically, what experience do you have? What skills do you bring to the board that would be an asset?
Okay, so job interview questions.
Right. It's a typical job interview. What's your experience in education? What's your connection to Henrico County schools? What do you know about the schools and that kind of thing? So you want to find that out as you're going through the process. And so everybody had those same questions. And so we met with each person individually. We had an opportunity to see, how do they think on their feet? How do they present themselves? Do they... not that this happened, but you want to find out, does that person have an agenda, so to speak? Is that person going to come in and say, I'm going to come in and fire everybody, that kind of thing? And not that happened, but still, you want to find out, why is this person here? What makes them tick? Do they have the experience that they will be able to walk in the door and hit the ground running? Because when you have a school board member that leaves, you don't have forever to learn. I mean, when I was elected in 2014, it was one of those weird circumstances for me. I was in a special election. I was told initially by the registrar, and they got it wrong, that I would be elected on election day and take office in January, 2 weeks before the election, and that's what I was told. So I thought, okay, that's correct. My opponent was told the same thing. Just about 2 weeks before the election, I called the school central office to ask a couple of questions about, because I was planning a post-election trip. So I wanted to be sure I was doing everything right. My husband and I were going to go to New York for the weekend. And so I was talking to the board clerk, and I said, I just want to be sure that if I do prevail, that I'm planning correctly. And she said, well, you'll be installed. You're elected on, if you are the one that the voters vote in, you'll be elected on Tuesday. You'd probably be installed Thursday, Friday, Monday. So I went, you mean in January? And she said, oh no, that week. And then the next week is the Virginia School Board Association conference. So you'll need to go to that. And so I said, but wait a minute. They told me I would take office in January. She said, oh no, you'll take office immediately. So there's no time for learning. There's no time. So ultimately, I told her, I said, well, they made a mistake, and they told me that I was going to take office in January. So needless to say, we had to change our plans.
Hopefully you weren't planning anything too major or expensive to get reimbursed.
No,
Broadway tickets, they were fine.
No, yeah, we actually did go to, since I did win, we went to New York for a short weekend, but still, So immediately we changed our plans from 4 or 5 days away and visiting my sister and all this stuff to just a quick trip to New York. Either way, I was okay. But so anyway, so when we're going through this process to replace Mrs. Marshall, we had to be sure that the person that we chose was going to be able to hit the ground running. And it's a particular thing for me to know some questions to ask and get a sense of this, because it's exactly what I had to do. And I didn't have 2.5 months, which I thought I was going to have, to get my ducks in a row. I had to be ready to assume the post quickly, to learn everything there is. The learning curve is huge. And so that you want to be sure that that person is of the demeanor to immediately come in and get to know the community, get to know principals, get to know staff, because you have to do it quickly. And so there's a lot that goes into that decision. And so ultimately, after interviewing and after meeting everybody that applied, a former principal really he's been great. And so that's who we chose.
Sounds hard to argue against someone who's literally been there, not just
been there and
teaching,
exactly.
administrative.
Right. And, he was and has been in the Tuckahoe community for a long time. And, I had people say, well, you had a public hearing, which we did, and only one person stood up and talked about Bill. Well, that's true. One person came and talked about Bill, said glowing things. But, you don't judge, or that's probably not the right word, you don't evaluate this whole process based on one person who came to any one thing. It's the body of the person's work, the whole package. You look at what they tell you in the interviews, you look and listen to what other people say. It's not just any one aspect. So that's what we were faced with. It was a hard decision. I mean, that was one of those that you lay awake at night going, okay, who's the best for this job? And since it's up to the four of us, you sit down, you talk about it, you work it out, and you come at a decision. And I think Bill's really happy, and he's done a great job. He's gotten to know principals very quickly and has done a great job representing Tuckahoe.
And he's not running, right? He's...
I don't think so. Not to my knowledge.
Yeah, it's one of the things...
I haven't really talked to him about it.
Get people who have no interest in making a career or lifestyle of politics. People just genuinely want to give back,
help.
want to serve.
Want to serve.
People without an agenda.
Right.
Now, that being said, I think there are some things... people with an agenda aren't. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Is it a good agenda or a bad agenda?
Right.
And what's the purpose? And lately, there's been a huge talk of pushing an agenda for more STEM, more of bringing back vocational training, especially with vocational training. Can you talk about that and what direction things are going, especially with the cost of college being ridiculous?
Well, we're actually expanding our career and tech ed programs. There's going to be a new center at Glen Allen. When Glen Allen High School was built, one of the things they had the forethought to do, which was fabulous, was to basically pour a concrete slab for a future career and tech ed center. We have more demand than we actually have seats in classrooms.
Oh, wow. That's great.
And so, when you're turning kids away, but the amazing part of our CTE programs is that depending on which one you're in, you can come out with with basically a license to be an electrician. Out of high school, you can get a job and be employed and have connections. I mean, Michael and Sons, not to give them a plug, but Michael and Sons, for example, has a program. We have students working for them. We have students working for various companies.
Feel free to give anyone a shout out here.
But
they're doing good work.
We have students who work for various companies, and they can come out of high school and be employable immediately and have that industry certification that they need to support themselves. And that's an amazing opportunity. And, between the career and tech ed classes that we offer, and we also have a program in 2 of our high schools where it's the Advanced College Academy, where you can take the equivalent of 2 years of college classes while you're in high school and get your jump get a huge jump.
That's great.
You can, be halfway through college. And we have kids who do it every year. It saves them a ton of money.
So something that seems bipartisan, but people on both sides of the political aisle generally say, let's bring back vocational training, let's push more STEM. Yet I hear a lot of rhetoric. How much work's actually being done?
Oh, a ton. I mean, we actually, this was the subject of our school board meeting last night. We're investing millions of dollars in STEM education. We're hiring STEM teachers at every middle school. We're instituting. It was kind of interesting. Dr. Kinlaw, when he was our superintendent, started this. Trying to look at our middle schools and our middle school, like if you just look at standardized testing, kind of like as we're going through elementary school, our kids progress and they're growing each year. They get to middle school, and like you said, there's a little crazy in there. You get to middle school, things kind of flatten out, and we weren't seeing a lot of growth for our middle school kids. Then they get to high school and they start growing again academically. And so our test scores and just listening to parents and to students, the kids were not excited about middle school. They really weren't. Our middle schools are the hardest ones to get accredited, for example. And so we have several middle schools that are not accredited yet. And so we decided that there's something we can do about that. What are we going to do to get kids excited about what they're learning? So one of the things we're doing is increasing the number of STEM classes and STEM education in middle school. We started the Gifted Academy at Wilder. We're trying to get kids in middle school moving forward. And so, but we're having a tremendous response from parents and from students. This is exactly what they want. We need more science. We need more technology. We need more math to get the kids moving, because if that's where we're going in a very technological world. And so it's getting a lot of attention and a lot of kids saying this is what we want. And so if you look at the success of the career and tech ed programs, we have so many kids who want to they want a chance to learn what is it like to be a veterinarian before they go to vet school, spend a lot of money, and go, well, I don't think I want to be a vet.
Before that.
Right. I mean, so if you go to Hermitage, it's amazing. Right in the middle of Hermitage, in the tech center, there's the vet lab where you can go and learn how to be a veterinary technician, for example. And there's a veterinarian who works with those kids. They get to take care of animals. They get to learn what it's like. But they get to test the waters and see, what am I interested in? And they do that without having to go to college, for example, or go to a particular training program other than college and go, well, that's not for me, so then I'll try something else. Yeah. It's an amazing...
That is amazing. I just look at the current setup. I think about, I'm 31 years old. I think about many of my friends who I went to college with,
right,
or I went to other colleges coming out of Godwin High School, Virginia Tech, UVA,
right,
all the other Virginia schools. And they got a great education in something that was of interest to them. Might be government, history, math,
right,
whatever.
Right.
Are they actually doing a job today that requires that education, or do they just do it for the benefits of the education? Now, there's nothing wrong with learning for the love of learning.
Right.
But it's being subsidized by the taxpayers when your students are going into essentially a life debt to pay for it. That's the issue.
That's the real problem. And so that's the beauty of the specialty centers that we have. And with all the different programs that we offer, kids get a chance to try things out. And, it was interesting. We had some parents that, when we started doing this at the middle school level, said, oh, no, you can't start talking about that at middle school. They don't know what they want to do. Well, they don't, because they haven't been given the opportunity to explore. So you want to give them every opportunity in the world to explore all these different things, and then they might choose a path that would surprise them.
Or rule one out, just as important.
Or rule one out, right.
When I was a freshman at Godwin, I wanted to be a theoretical physicist.
Oh, wow.
I quickly discovered there's a lot of math involved, and that wasn't for me. But that Math and Science Specialty Center was my opportunity to figure it out early on.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I look at so many kids that go on the 5-year plan now. for college. And there's a reason why. Oftentimes they're switching their majors because by the time they actually get through the basics, they get into their major classes, they go, this is not of interest to me anymore. And they didn't really have that opportunity to try things out. So that's the beauty of offering lots of different choices. I mean, at Godwin now is the Center for Medical Sciences. They still have a real strong math and science program, but it's not called that anymore. But we had a lot of demand for biochem and for taking an anatomy class and stuff like that, because there were a lot of kids who thought they want to go to medical school. They thought they wanted to go into some form of medical sciences. This gives them an opportunity to try that without incurring a lot of debt, but then they also can find out, I love it, and it gives them a leg up because it's a partnership with MCV. It gives them a leg up to say, this is what I want to do, and they're excited about their education. And so when you add that to the middle school level, they get more excited and buy into, getting an education and being an active participant in that.
And a lot of people are excited in school. They love the experience so much that they want to come back as teachers, pass on what they've learned.
Right.
It's kind of funny. A girl I lived down the block from me, lived down the street. She came back to Henrico County,
right,
and is teaching in one of the newer high schools.
Right. Well, we have our Grow Your Own. We have Teachers for Tomorrow, and so we have a group of teachers of students who are getting experience practicing being a teacher, and we give them a signing bonus if they come back and that kind of thing, because there is a national teacher shortage. You want to encourage people to be teachers, and you want them to have something to look forward to come back and have a guaranteed job.
So let's talk about the process of becoming a teacher. A couple of things about that, or getting them here. Teacher pay, like to get your thoughts on that, but also it seems increasingly that when I was going through the whole school system, every teacher had a bachelor's degree. No one except the youngest teachers had a master's degree.
Right, and now they're coming out with a master's. Right,
is it actually making teachers more effective, better? Is it improving things? We've raised the standards, but are we getting a better outcome? I guess
I think it is. I mean, the younger teachers that I talk to that come out with their master's degree. They get a lot of practical experience with their masters, and they have just a more depth of knowledge, and I think that's paying off. The teachers that I talk, they feel more prepared, because being a teacher, it anymore at least, is just such a tough job. We ask a lot of our teachers, and they are having to, especially at the elementary level, you're planning for the core subjects, and you're also watching the kids. You're having to do interdisciplinary projects, a lot of project-based learning, but you're asking them to be with those same kids all day long, keep them energized, keep them moving, keep them engaged all day long without much of a break. And that's tough. And so classroom management to me is the key. And so one of the things I think a lot of our teachers that come in with their master's degree have more knowledge about managing the day and managing students, inspiring them to be engaged in the day. And that takes a bit of skill. And
teachers today are facing challenges and issues that they didn't used to.
Right.
And one of them is going to school safety. Active shooter drills.
Absolutely.
I saw the bill. I think it might have been sponsored by Schuyler.
He was on the safety committee, and came out of that with a lot of good ideas, and I think it's heading us in the right direction. But Henrico has a great partnership with our Henrico Police Department and the State Department of Education on a plan in place. Now, granted, you can't plan for everything, but the drills are, it's a necessity. We have to do it. We have to practice. I remember when I was at Short Pump Elementary, one day I we came out of my classroom, fire drill is going, and one of the exits was blocked. The exit, it was our primary exit. And we had taught the kids, you have your primary exit and your secondary exit. But it was
this a fire drill or shooter drill?
It was actually a fire drill.
Okay.
But, I've got young kids and in my classroom, and so they used paper, looked like paper flames over the front of one of the doors. And so it was the first time we had ever practiced it. It was 10 years ago. And so we practiced with fake flames, but the kids had never seen it before. And so we had told the kids before that, at some point in time, the exit you think you're going to go out of is going to be blocked. So what are you going to do? And so we set this up, and so we had practiced primary exit, secondary exit, and there are all these different, drills you take the kids through. So after we had practiced a time or two going at the main door and the secondary door, we went to the main door and it was blocked with this paper flame. And the kids freaked out a bit, and they thought, it was different. So when it's different, you have to be able to keep your head, think clearly, so you stay safe.
And how old were these kids?
The ones I had in my classroom at the time were 7.
Okay.
And so I had my little second graders in there, and so it was just blocked with paper, but we couldn't use that door. So I had to look at them and said, okay, that door's blocked. Let's turn around. Let's go the other way, And so you're going against your normal drill, because drill after drill after drill, the kids get complacent. And so you have to mix it up a little bit. You have to have something happen differently so the kids understand it's not always going to be the same. So then, a few years later, they start shooter drills, which kids weren't used to. And so you have to practice these things, and you have to do them. You can't always do them the same, because then the kids, they kind of go, oh, it's just another drill.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
always a drill.
Yeah, especially, if the fire alarm's going off again, another fire drill,
Right.
people just sit there, they don't move.
That's right.
Just the other day in this building, the fire alarm went off. No
Right.
one moved. No one was just, I wonder how long until that blows over.
Right.
Again, your assumption now when the fire alarm goes off is it's a false alarm.
It's a false alarm. And, the thing is, though, is that there's been research done that with a couple of the school shooters, they actually pulled a fire alarm, and they shot the kids as they came out.
I remember that one. They were
Right.
in the field. And
Right. And so now we're even practicing not leaving the building.
It's interesting.
It's terrible you have to do it, but,
Well, it is terrible. It's also interesting. Again, this is more in my area, Homeland Security.
Right.
And statistically speaking, students are safer than they've ever been on school grounds. And I mean, not just active shooters. I say that we're in a
Absolutely.
community where many people in this community know someone, myself, who's
Right.
involved in Virginia Tech, a victim there, or the
Right.
parents of a child.
Yep, me too.
So that's very close to home.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, statistically speaking, schools are the safest place for students to be.
Right.
For all the talk about bullying, there's been decreases, not increases, compared to trends 20, 30, 40 years. Things are
Right.
getting a lot better.
Right.
Yet there's always seems to be a perception, though, despite statistics, that things are getting worse. But I mean, I get it. When your child comes in from school crying,
Right.
that child is your world.
In your world, it's worse.
Absolutely.
Right, absolutely. And, I think we're just paying more attention to these things. And that goes back to what we talked about earlier about guidance counselors. They're the ones that are the first person you go to. And you say, okay, my child's having a bullying issue or whatever is compromising their safety and security at school. And so we're depending on them to fix the problem. And so I don't know. I think it's a lot of conversation that needs to happen. When you talk to parents about school safety, they think a lot of times just the shooter drills and it's a school shooter, but there's a lot of ways to compromise safety at school. And you're right. I mean, kids are safer at school than anywhere else. They're probably safer at school than they are driving to school.
Oh, yeah.
But you still have to ensure that they are. And it is a topic of conversation. We have a great team of people in Henrico that go around and evaluate every school. It's an incredible process and we go well beyond what is required. And and that's a good thing, obviously. We have school resource officers in our schools, and we have this wonderful relationship with the police department. But when it comes to bullying, you can't, you don't police that. There's not, we have a terrific code of conduct. We work, one of the biggest things that happened right after I got on the board was just a complete rewriting of the code of conduct. And there's a big section on, we don't tolerate bullying. And it is a real big topic of conversation. We have asked our principals, and it's been going on for years now, that if you see bullying, react to it. And I hear less and less about it, but I know it is still there.
It's hard to imagine something that's been going on for thousands of years to
I
disappear. I mean, you just go read back to the writings of the ancient Greeks, to medieval,
Right.
today, classical era, Charles
Right.
Dickens. It
Right.
seems like part of human nature. Now, obviously, the whole idea of an education, civilization, is we rise above our
Right.
base nature.
Right. But I'm trying to think of any parent that I know that hasn't had at some point in time their kid go through some sort of bullying, even my own children.
In middle school, I was bullied mercilessly. I was one of the shortest kids in the class, wore
Hard
glasses,
to believe.
rather read
Yeah.
a book over during recess and run around with
Right.
the other kids.
Right.
I was a stereotypical looking nerd.
Right.
Today I'm over 6 feet tall and in the Army, so I can't say I get bullied much. But one thing that I do remember that was very effective was just taking a swing at the bully.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how well that would go over today.
Essentially disarms the bully. Right.
Well,
yeah.
again, they might be bullied, but they don't want to get punched in the face. Even if they could kick my butt afterwards, it still wasn't worth it.
Right. I don't know. Well, I was. It was interesting. I went to graduation for Maggie Walker. The first, I think it was first or second year I was on the board, and my neighbor's child was the co-valedictorian, and he's rather he's height challenged, as he would like to call himself, and he brought out a little step stool to make his valedictory speech, and he brought a little step stool so he could be as tall as the girl who was his co-valedictorian. And his speech was wonderful, and it was about embracing his inner nerd and the differences amongst the kids in the class and how they embrace the differences. And, I think that's part of the conversation now, is embracing differences and that it's okay to be different. And the more we have that conversation, I think, the less bullying might happen, but it still does. And it's heartbreaking, and you have to work with the bully as much as you do the victim, and you can't forget the victim in
kindergarten or first grade, I dressed up as Batman for Halloween. Mm-hmm. And at the time, he was teased mercilessly, "That's so lame, you're such a dork." Now I look at what are some of the hottest action figures today, the hottest movies, and the Big Bang Theory on TV.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's probably been one of the best things, the change in cultural perception.
Power Rangers were Dave and Matthew.
Oh, yeah. I caught the tail end of that. I thought they were cool, but I got teased a little for that.
Yeah,
just like
Dave
Batman.
did when he was, I think he was the red Power Ranger, like in first grade or something. And he was teased, but he liked them, so he did it, But, yeah, I know. I think it kind of goes in cycles. But, bullying, it is tough to deal with. And parents just, your heart breaks for the kid. And parents have a real hard time dealing with it. But if you can open the conversation with the other parent and stuff, I think that helps. But again, it goes back to our guidance counselors and working. I know a lot of times they'll work in small groups with kids and restorative practices.
Especially when you're working with young children, elementary, middle school, they don't have the social skills to, okay, kid's acting like a bully, how do you deal with that?
Right.
Even some adults don't know how to deal with it. That's how I get a lot of my clients as a criminal defense lawyer.
I bet.
Someone's being bullied at a bar. What do you do about it?
Right. You're right.
And a number of solutions I've seen people try. Some just pull out a firearm and shoot it in the air a few times. Gosh. Other times it's to walk away, call the person's wife, and pretend that you're having an affair with them.
Oh my gosh, you could probably write a book about some of this.
Well, that's one of the books I'm working on right now.
I bet.
But again, going back to the children, though, but they don't know how to deal with it. I know I sure didn't. Maybe it would have been useful back then to have had the counselor who was effective at that.
Right. Well, and you know, at the school level, that's about all you can do is try to get that conversation going, get the kids to understand this is how you hurt the other person, and to make them understand, you know, that's a person too. But again, we have our code of conduct, and there are consequences if you are hurting someone else in that way. There are consequences. It's in black and white. And oftentimes, if you can just make the kid understand, you know, this, it's like I said earlier, we won't tolerate this. And I think you do have to draw a line. You know, so many people, I think these days, are a little too easy on kids, and they don't believe in consequences. But I think this is one where, yes, if you're going to act inappropriately towards someone else and hurt them like that, yes, you're going to suffer some consequences.
And again, I can see for schools the difficulty. If you could elaborate on this, you know, when someone gets physical, that's clear and obvious when someone lays a hand on you.
Right.
That was my red line as a kid when I punched
Sure.
someone in the face.
Right.
To varying levels of effectiveness.
Right.
But when it was the verbal stuff,
Verbal,
again, it's hard to know how do you respond appropriately, especially when you're a kid. It's harder for schools and administrators and teachers to recognize.
Well, and it's especially hard when you throw social media in there. And
issues that neither of us had to deal with when we were in school.
Exactly. And you throw that in there, or it's either something tweeted or on Instagram or on Facebook or something that's done outside of school, makes it especially difficult. And sometimes parents expect schools to respond when something's done online like that, which we can't do. Really don't. We don't have the authority to do that.
I was thinking the legal term jurisdiction to
right, exactly.
Police students when they're not on school grounds.
Exactly. But if they use a school computer, yes.
What about if it's during school hours? If someone pulls out a cell phone and tweets something.
It's on school property. It happened during school. That kind of thing. Yes, we can get involved. But if they do it after hours, you're right. We can't. So, but especially if they do anything like that on a school laptop, and you know, I think it's fascinating to me that some of the kids will do things on our school issued laptop, and they think we won't find out. But
again, you use that word about students think.
Oh my gosh, it's digital, folks. We can track.
Well, honestly, it's not just kids. It's
the adults too. Sure.
Oh, sure. That's how I get many clients. Okay, you're doing drug deals over a certain app, and yes, that leaves a record.
Right. Of course it does. And you know, I think people don't understand. I mean, it goes to staff members. It goes obviously to our students that are using the technology that we've provided. If you use it in an inappropriate way, yes, we can find out. Goes without saying. I mean, it leaves the digital footprint. So you know, there's things you can check.
And a lot of there are new laws passed in varying states. Looks like Virginia's working on it about bullying, cyberbullying.
Right.
And something that I'm concerned about, though, just not just someone who works in criminal law, but also someone who cares about education, is I don't want children to have criminal records based on just doing dumb things kids do.
Right.
And I know we have an active law enforcement presence on school grounds. Now it's part of it's a school shooter, but in the past it's been for a lot of disciplinary issues.
Right. And that's a discussion we have ongoing with our SROs.
It used to be, I punched a kid. I punched the principal's kid one day in middle school. He was twice my size and being a bully.
Right.
And for clarification, this was the kid of my Sunday school principal.
Oh, wow.
Just make the story a little better. No, it was a bully. I didn't get in trouble for this. But again, now, we had a meeting.
Right.
There's a little intervention on that end.
Right.
Talk about how you conduct yourself. Now, I feel like if that were to happen today, the police would be called. The students would be criminally charged.
I don't think so. No. I mean, we go to our code of conduct. There's a process, and it depends on the level and the severity of what the person does. And you know, it's if you can imagine a Christmas tree with lots of branches, it's like, you know, here's the thing. This is where it starts. These are the possible consequences, and There are times when you call in the police, but it's generally when it's physical or it's a firearm or drug possession or something like that. But one of the really great things about our school resource officers is that trying to build that level of trust and relationship that you can prevent. You can begin to get to know the kids enough that if they're having a problem, they will come to you before they react. And that's a good thing.
I'm quite a few years removed from that. What is that? Being a narc, being a snitch? Snitches get stitches.
No, you'd be surprised. I mean, we have
doesn't make things worse for the student.
It really doesn't. I mean, the folks that are school resource officers, and there's two. There's school security officers and resource officers, and part of what they do, they're there all the time. So they just are part of the fabric of the school. And so, for example, a couple years ago, we had, tragically, one of our SROs got cancer. He passed away. This whole student body just loved this guy. And they become people that they trust. And that's one of the nice things about having these folks. It's not, oh, yeah, he comes once a month. They build a relationship with the kids, and they're essentially they do classroom lessons and things like that, so that the kids look at him as yet another teacher, so to speak.
That's refreshing to hear.
Oh, it's wonderful. And if you can build those relationships, and you have somebody who's really good at building those relationships, they become a trusted person, and it really does have a big effect on all of the criminal activity that could go on that you hopefully can prevent.
Okay, let's talk a little more about that criminal activity on school grounds.
Yeah, it does happen.
Well, yeah, I mean, when I was in high school, there's certain kids you just know if you need to buy weed, they're the ones you go to.
Oh gosh.
That's still true today. There's always a few people like that.
Yes.
And think about the DARE education program. Research has been done on that, showing students who went through DARE were more likely to use drugs.
Yeah, that was
not
very
less.
informative.
So what changes have been put in place, especially with the opioid issue? Because I've represented as defendants in the criminal courts here, people who went to school. Well, not anyone I knew personally, but people I did go to school with.
Sure.
And just what's happened.
Drug education is incredibly important. We're doing it, and I think it's changed. It's the DARE program. I think you're right. That's been proven to not be terribly effective, and so they're doing different kinds of education of kids. A lot of it is it's a little less informative than it was before. But because I think that's what kids interpreted. They taught them stuff they didn't know. But you still have to make kids aware. And so one of the things we are doing is working with, including parents in this conversation, which I think is so important, especially with the opioid crisis. A lot of parent education going on, education of kids about, you have your wisdom teeth out, which it's amazing. The statistics that will tell you that a lot of this starts when kids get their wisdom teeth out, and the parents keep the painkillers, and it's accessible and that kind of thing. So you have to educate kids as to if it's not prescribed for you, don't take it. That kind of conversation. And there's more of it going on. I mean, I have to really applaud Mike Wade, our sheriff, who's the education program that they're doing, and we're cooperating as a cooperative thing, providing resources to educate kids on the opioid crisis. It's an incredible amount of work he's doing. But surprisingly, I don't know if people know about it, but I went to a school health advisory committee meeting a couple years ago, partnering with CVS and Walgreens to educate kids, and so they're providing materials, and so it's more. It's kids just have to know about this and the problems that can cause, and it's more avoidance. Please just don't go down this road, because this is what's going to happen, and how quickly you can become addicted and that kind of thing. And I mean, it's the statistics are frightening.
Oh yeah,
but. Again, go back to that code of conduct. We try to teach them there are consequences to doing this stuff. And that's honestly the hardest part about being a school board member, is when the kids don't listen, they don't heed the warnings, they get involved in either drugs or violent acts or something like that. And then eventually down the road, they get to the board to decide.
They're going to become my client someday.
Right, yeah. and you hope not. But Henrico County does, and again, I don't know what people know, when I worked in Prince William, for example, if you were expelled from Prince William County, which means you're going to be not coming to school for a year, there was no alternative. You just didn't come to school for a year, and it was up to you and your parents to figure it out. And there are other counties that do that. Henrico is different, and we offer alternate programs. So, for example, when we have an expulsion that comes to us because of a drug violation, firearm, physical altercation, something like that, we have several choices as to what we can provide, still have that person continue their education. It's not going to be at their home-based school. They're not going to still go to Hermitage or Godwin or wherever they were going to school before. And so they might go to Virginia Randolph. They might go to the Dooley School. They might do homebound education, but we make sure that their education continues so that when they come back after that year, they're a little more appreciative of that home, that of their home school. You hope that they will go back there and they will just go right on with their education. They haven't lost a year of their life, and they haven't lost a year of moving forward. And so we might mandate, for example, counseling, drug counseling, something like that. So there are a lot of strings attached to them coming back, but we made sure that their education continues.
That's good. I just never understood the idea you're misbehaving in school, so we're just kick you out and just cut you off.
Right. Yeah, we don't do that anymore. Yeah.
Well, again, the literature has just shown that's not effective.
It's not effective.
What is a kid with a lot of free time on his hands out of school going to be productive or a problem?
Sure, they're just going to get in more trouble. Right.
You don't even need literature on that. That's just experience.
Right. And so, like long-term suspensions and things like that, we really don't. We have a lot of suspensions, but they're short, and the majority of them. And so if, like you'll see on a school board agenda, expulsion of a student, and that's 1 year, but we provide that they will have education somewhere else and in an alternative setting, usually small class sizes meets their needs, that kind of thing. If it's a special ed student, we're going to, the team of special ed experts will decide where are we going to educate that child. But we just don't forget them for a year. And so a lot of counties do. They just say, you're expelled, that's it. And a lot of counties do long-term 6-month suspensions and stuff like that. But so if a child is fully expelled, they have an alternate way of continuing.
That's good. I know the recent bill went through the General Assembly, at least I think it's finished going through, about limiting how long a student can be suspended for.
Right. And we actually opposed that. We'd like to be able to, we take each disciplinary case, look at it very thoroughly. Sometimes it might be a 5-10 day suspension, something like that. You need a break. You need to go reset yourself. But we're doing less and less suspension. We have a program called Reset. That's a good choice of words on my part, but where you can get out of the classroom for if you're having a problem in the classroom, you're being disruptive or whatever, you can say, okay, you're going to reset. And it's like used to be in school suspension, but now you can use Reset where you can go for an hour. You can go calm yourself down, then go back to class. And we're trying more and more alternatives. We don't want to suspend kids. Because you're right. It's not achieving what people used to think it achieves. And so now we know they're better off in school. And we know that we can serve them better and meet their needs better if they're with us than without, out in the world.
Again, you want students to learn from their mistakes, so you kick them out of the place of learning.
Exactly.
Again, I like what you said about a reset or even just 5-10 days. And yes, there are people who have behavioral problems, best way to put it. They're antisocial personalities.
Yeah, but we also have programs for that.
But just finding a place for them, not just kicking them out.
Right, exactly. And we're trying all different kinds of ways to address this problem. And so we have more and more behavior therapists. We have people in schools whose job is to work with kids and say, okay, look, this behavior is not acceptable. Let's work on how to improve it and work with kids as they present themselves and try and make changes that will be long lasting for them. And it's making a difference. And so our suspension numbers, it's incredible.
Now, speaking of changes making a difference, there's been an increased push for schools to serve free breakfast, or free lunch programs.
Yeah.
When I was in Goblin, I remember that you had 22 minutes for lunch, and there's a 22-minute break period as well.
Right.
Not a recess, but study,
Right, yeah.
and another two 22-minute periods that were your classroom time.
Right.
And the students who wanted to get it wasn't a free lunch, but you'd work for it, they spend their 22-minute break period working in the kitchen.
Right.
So what is the current status of things today? How do things work to provide for people?
Well, I mean, like I said earlier, we have 44% of the students in the county, and out of 50,000, just do the math. You know, you're looking at almost half of the kids who are in our schools that qualify for either free and reduced lunch or some sort of reduction in the cost. But there's breakfast programs, there's backpacks for the weekends. It's amazing how many kids have issues as far as finding enough food to eat. And the programs that are in place, I mean, Feed More, for example, runs a program my Rotary Club helps with, where we go in.
Which Rotary chapter are you in?
Rotary Club of Short Pump.
Rotary Club of Innsbruck.
Are you really?
I had no idea.
Short Pump is an offshoot of Innsbruck from 10 years ago.
You all do lunch meetings though, right?
We do.
That is my holdout.
Right.
I do the breakfast ones.
Yeah, and some people like to do a breakfast club. We do a lunch club. But when it was first started, since Innsbruck was the breakfast, they said, okay, we'll do one for lunch. So
It does make sense.
Yeah.
A lot of people can't do the breakfast
That's
one.
right. So we're a small club, but still we go periodically and pack backpacks through Feed More that are then delivered to schools, and kids take those home on the weekends so they'll have something to eat before school starts again on Monday morning. And it's amazing to me that is such a need, but it's huge.
Now, is it still the case for high schoolers today, though, that they have to work to to get free reduced?
I don't think so, but I am not positive. I have not heard about that in years. I need to find out, because I don't think they do anymore.
Yeah, it's been about 12, 13 years since I was through there. A lot's changed.
I haven't heard of that.
And I can't imagine putting kindergartners to work in the kitchen either.
No, I've
kill
never
themselves.
heard of that. Yeah, I've never seen it in the elementary school. I don't know if they do that in the high schools, but I don't think so. I mean, there's a whole movement. I don't know if you've ever heard this term, but lunch shaming.
Yes.
And so years and years ago, you used to, if you didn't have money for lunch, you got a very tired looking cheese sandwich and a carton of milk, and that was it. And so today, if your lunch account, for example, doesn't have money in it or whatever, that doesn't happen anymore. You get a regular lunch. But the Henrico Education Foundation, for example, has a fund called Let's Feed Kids that parents can tap into if they don't have the money to put in their kids' lunch account, or if they've gone into debt. And they can pay it off.
Speaking of feeding kids, going back to the days of Gowan, often what I do is I put about 55, 65 cents in the soda machine to get a Pepsi, and I get a beef and cheese burrito from the Taco Bell line. Now, our hypersensitive nutrition age, I think we've made a lot of improvements for the better.
Right. Well, there are.
Or I remember you get a slice of pizza, and it was a square shaped, and it wasn't any good.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Or even not. It was literally nacho lunch. It was chips covered with cheese sauce.
Yeah, that was about it. Yeah, I think things have improved quite a bit. Yeah, our school nutrition group, they win national awards for the program that they offer for kids now. It's incredible. But I think we still do have some private vendors that come in, like Subway and stuff, and there are a lot of nutritious choices that changed quite a bit. That is one complaint I never get, surprisingly enough, about what the kids eat at school.
That's incredible.
I haven't had one complaint about that in 5 years.
I also remember there, where the private vendor lines, there's Taco Bell, they
Oh,
switch
yeah.
out someone
Oh,
else
yeah.
another year,
Yeah.
a couple others, maybe a Subway.
I think Subway is, I have to check. I think Subway's still
The
there.
official
but-
school, Henrico County Public School line, though,
Right.
they had every day the same thing. It was some sort of breaded and fried chicken, might be nuggets, tenders,
Right.
or popcorn
Oh, yeah.
chicken,
Yeah.
and fries.
I think we're a lot better than that now. Good salad offerings, things like that. Yeah, I think it's much better. I haven't been to a high school in a while at lunchtime. The last time I went was at Deep Run to look at their One Lunch program. If you've heard about how Deep Run does One Lunch, it's great. But I'll have to go find out.
How does Steve Run do their one lunch?
It is fascinating. Mr. Pritchard, who's the principal at Deep Run, saw it happening and heard about it. I think it's at James River High School in Chesterfield. But you know how when you were at Godwin, they had like 3 or 4 lunch periods.
I remember there were 4 lunch periods.
Right. And so in some of those classes, you go to class for 30 minutes, you'd have, or 22 minutes, you go have lunch and then come back to class. And so the idea is basically there's an hour and a half for lunch. Everybody in the whole school has lunch at the same time. So ergo, one lunch.
Do you have enough space for everyone?
Oh, yeah.
Because
Oh,
the
yeah.
Godwin cafeteria could only hold about 500
Well,
at a
but
time.
the interesting part is that during that time, tutoring can happen, clubs can meet, things can happen during that. And normally, if you think about it, with 4 lunch sections, you basically are taking the equivalent of 2 hours in the middle of the day to feed everyone. So cut that by 30 minutes, so you've gained 30 to 40 minutes of instruction time, which is what they achieved with one lunch. Everybody has lunch at the same time, but let's say, for example, some teachers will have tutoring first or available, or clubs will meet first, so not everybody eats at the same time. You've got an hour and a half to eat. So some kids will go get tutoring help. Some kids will go make up a test. They'll have a club meeting, and then they'll go eat. And then other times they might go take a walk outside. They might go eat second. They might go eat lunch last. And it just sort of works out.
Now, are they ever allowed to leave school grounds during this
No.
period? They can't.
No.
They're running off to McDonald's
No,
for a Big Mac.
No, they stay at school. They've enlarged the courtyard outside with more furniture. There's furniture upstairs where there are tables where the kids can eat. Their senior lounge has more furniture in it. And so you find a spot. Classrooms are open. You can eat anywhere you want to. And the teachers rotate in and out who's there, wandering around, watching kids, making sure they're supervised. But the beauty of it is, let's say the English department needs to meet together for common planning or whatever, they can do that during one lunch. They don't have to do it after school. Or if there's something that it can happen during one lunch. But again, they gained, I think it's an hour and 30 minutes, something like that for lunch. But they gained instruction time. And the other benefit, it's just fascinating, is that those kids who can't stay after school because they either have a job or they don't have transportation home, can partake in a club or something like that they otherwise would have been excluded from. So the joining and being part of things has increased as well. So, I mean, they started this, I think this is the 3rd year that they've been doing one lunch. It's a huge success. And the kids love it. Parents, some people were a little dubious at first, especially staff members, but it's just been so well received, and it's a true success story of doing something different, gaining instruction time. There's no more split classes. Kids are more involved. It's pretty awesome.
I just want to check, make sure things are going well.
Okay, good.
It's looking good. And I appreciate how long you've been here. Went over time. I'm just enjoying the conversation so much.
Thank you.
We keep talking about education.
Yeah.
And one thing we want to educate ourselves about is how we improve education, the next step.
Right.
And I know just looking at Henrico County school system,
Mm-hmm.
They build schools are products of the times of which they're built.
Right.
I guess Godwin High School opened in 1980.
I know.
And it looked like it was built by a prison maker. There's very few windows.
Right. Very few windows, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if it's actually, we were told that it was built by people who do prisons. I don't know if that's urban legend, but it felt that way.
It is. Yeah.
But look at the lessons learned though about
Right.
what's best. Look at Deep Run Glen Allen High School, much more spacious, beautiful
Right.
windows. You don't feel like you're going herded like cattle through a corridor,
Right.
as one
Right.
principal referred to us, comparing us to
Right.
livestock, saying, "How do you move through the hallways,
Right.
especially at an intersection?"
Right.
Looking ahead, what's on the future horizon for Henrico County Public Schools, especially looking at Keene Road and talk about a new school out there?
Well, we're, nothing planned for Kane Road at this point. Saving it, I think just purely looking at what I think will happen and what I've been talking to the staff about. I think Kane Road will turn into an elementary school build out there at some point. I wouldn't be surprised if we need a high school at some point.
All the growth in the far west side, especially.
Exactly. Nothing on the books, nothing planned right now. But it's out there. It's one of those things we know will happen at some point. Projections for growth in Henrico are pretty stable for the next 5-7 years. There are some, and I don't know how you do this, but some people project out that 10-15 years from now we're really going to have some growth, but we're stable to a point. But the problem is the growth in the West End. You're right, and that's something I hear a lot about.
They're building more homes. They're still finding space to build in
absolutely.
Wyndham, the area off Gaydon Road in the far West End, by Stryker Park.
Right.
And even if you go across the street from Short Pump, going almost to the Goochland area, they've had that whole.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there are condos being built with elevators.
Right.
Which is
Absolutely.
So incredible.
Absolutely. And so, it's surprising though. Knuckles Farm Elementary is right behind the Greengate development and across the street from the Wegmans development, and there are only like 10-15 kids who come from Greengate, but they will over time. And so, just extracting out what we think will happen in the future, it's I wouldn't be surprised. I think we'll have to plan on another elementary school within the next 5 years or so. There's talk of possibly needing another middle school, maybe on the northern part, the Brooklyn district of
and
the
when
side.
those new schools are built, that's going to create a lot of controversy of redistricting.
Absolutely.
I
well,
get it.
and
You buy
we're
your
looking
home
at
based
we're looking at redistricting now because the overcrowded schools in the West End, and there's room in the East End and in some of the middle. But if you look around Parham Road corridor, there's overcrowding. But we're getting ready to build a new Tucker and a new Highland Springs. Those will open in 21, and when they do, they'll have more capacity than they do now. So that'll forestall needing a high school. But I don't know. It's exciting things about the new schools and renovations and just keeping our physical, buildings in better shape than they have been. Is exciting.
Well, as people want change in a lot of areas, some things they want them to be remain the same. You'll have heads butting.
Absolutely.
I'm going right to the issue of the name, the Freeman Rebels.
Yeah,
my mother's an alumnus of Freeman. I get that we're in a very different era today.
Right. But, that is one area school boards don't touch. Schools get to pick their own mascots. And, for example, when we renamed Byrd Middle School to Quioccasin, the kids decided to change the mascot. They didn't have to. It was up to them. And so the school community itself picks the mascot, picks themes, picks school colors, stuff like that. That is not school board mandated. And so and I do hear occasionally from people about the Freeman Rebels. And so if the Freeman kids and the community decide to change, that's up to them. That's not mandated by us. We pick school names and stop there.
That's good. Not to have to get involved in a fight.
Right. Well, because that's one you will never win. That is a very polarizing thing. So, but that's to me part of school spirit. The students need to own that and to decide for themselves what they want in their school, because it is their school.
That's not saying. Look, we've covered so much today, and one of the reasons I want to start this podcast is, with the media, things come on 30-second sound bites,
sure.
1 to 2 minutes. You don't have time to really get much out there. And people, I feel like in the media, people are found to fill an already written narrative.
Right.
We've covered a lot of ground today. Everything, standardized testing, recruiting teachers, school safety. I want to make sure that is there anything else you think we should be covering or like to elaborate on?
The only other thing I can think of is that I think engaging in dialogue is so important. And so often I will find, like when Short Pump Middle, those kinds of events happen. People think they know because of those 30-second sound bites what's going on and what's happening. And so I just wish people would pause for a second, learn everything there is to learn before you rush to judgment. I have, you see a lot in doing my job or any kind of job where you're in local government, especially, I think, because local government affects everybody's life so much more so than anything else. But I just do, civil discourse would be so nice. And because we occasionally get yelled at, just like this board of supervisors gets yelled. People get upset. And it's understandable, because when you talk about schools, you're talking about your child, and people get passionate, and I understand that. And I did when my kids were in school. I still get passionate about it. But I just, that's the only other thing I really do wish, is that civil discourse would come back and more conversations like we're having, as opposed to people just rushing to judgment that they think they know about things. But so I appreciate the opportunity. Truly,
I thank you for coming on. I mean, we're just such a highly polarized, highly politicized world, and I feel like you can't get out there and have an honest conversation.
Honest conversation, right? Exactly.
Without people, making bizarre accusations about your motives, why you're doing things,
right?
Or what your real agenda is.
And the interesting thing is, for me, because I come at it, I don't know what other people's motives are, but I just truly love making a difference, because it is what drives me. And knowing, sometimes, I've been on the board now for 5 years, and so the novelty of that has sort of worn off. But their first couple of years, I remember vividly, I would go home from an event I had been to, and I would tell my husband, I was like, how did this happen? How did I get to this point where I'm given this opportunity to make a change? And, as a teacher, I was used to working with principals and very rarely ever talk to a superintendent, and now I find myself in a room full of superintendents, in a room full of school board members from other counties, and having the possibility of affecting the education of a person. And that's a long, to me, I look at the ramifications of that, and sometimes it just kind of overwhelms me. I'm like, wow, I get to do that. And so I take it really seriously. It sounds trite to say, but I take really as an honor to be given that opportunity.
It is an honor. I feel so lucky and privileged to be teaching at VCU.
Oh yeah.
I was so lucky. I was 25 years old and they asked me to start teaching.
That's
I was
awesome.
Blown away. And
yeah.
I'm thinking, okay, these students, I'm in the Homeland Security program, which is often very much crossed with criminal justice. My students go on to be police officers, firefighters, FBI, CIA, DEA, State Department. They're the people who keep us safe, and I'm the one who gets the privilege. That's the opportunity to teach them. It is a privilege,
right? It's a good word.
I literally see my former students in court, even cross-examined a couple of some trials.
Right, it's awesome. That's awesome.
It's really a privilege to get at that role, and setting others up for success.
Right. Well, and you really are affecting the life of someone else. And that's awesome.
On my other hand, I hate to say it, I've been a gatekeeper a couple other times as well.
Yeah. I
said my students are going to law enforcement in areas where you're presumed to be trustworthy.
Right.
If I catch them cheating on a test, if you can't you can't even be honest on a test, you have no business in the military.
Right. But see,
or
that's a good.
Law enforcement.
That's good that they learn that's not the right thing for them. That's you got to have a little integrity to do that.
With an honors fail on a transcript, I don't think any student will be, or former student will be hired.
Right.
Well, hopefully it wouldn't be.
Right. But I appreciate the opportunity to sit and chat with you for a while. This has been awesome.
I enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much for coming on. And do you have any last message or words, people, before I hit stop recording?
No, I just keep. I think we ought to all be talking the line and just keep the conversation going. It's important. It's important for our community.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.